What sort of a kid were you?
My sister and two brothers drowned. My mum lost the plot. I always thought my grandmother was my mother. People see me as that footballer. They don't know the things that I've done. My dad was a really tough guy. He's 6'4", he had hands like mitts. I'm going to have to give you a hiding, but I'm going to apologise, sorry, because I love you.
What impact does it have on a child seeing your mum get beaten up by your dad?
It's traumatic. I got diagnosed with PTSD. I brought one of them home when I was at Newcastle. A couple of years later, he did the same thing. And his note said, just contact my bro and he'll sort everything out. And my story is exactly the same as those two. Why am I still here? There's something wrong with this picture. The goal I writ was to have a 2-story home.
None of it was your fault. Are you proud of yourself?
The biggest person I have to convince is myself.
Oh, good, you're here. Come on. This is the centre of performance. Whenever there's a top performance in New Zealand, it all comes from here. That's Lisa Carrington. She's been doing that for days. That's the boy who got the hole-in-one in Taupo. Oh, he did it again. Hey, Finn, how's the performance going?
Top tier.
Nice. This is our Generate room. In here, you'll find our top performers helping Kiwis maximise their KiwiSaver investments. Get in here, Finn. Maximise. Right, Generate. Putting performance first.
Kempy, Tony Kemp, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Dom. Yeah, happy to be here, mate.
Why now?
Oh, it's like I was saying before, it's been a number of requests to try and get me on a podcast, but through friends and me doing my homework and talking, to those people about, is it time to talk? I've just decided, like Dom, Harvey, people actually rate you and give you a good score, and I thought, why not go on Dom's show and have a chat.
I appreciate it. And just before we started, you said there might be some things that you talk about that you've never talked about before. I suppose that depends on me asking the right questions or taking it in the right area.
Well, yeah, you're the host, aren't you? You're sort of getting it out of me. But yeah, like as people, Dom. The current one is they know me for my opinion on the Warriors. Working with Marty Devlin or running, my radio breakfast show with Izzy when I was doing that, and being so polarising around giving my opinion. But yeah, I've had a wonderful football career, and for 35 years it's been around, and but it's I don't talk a hell of a lot about Tony Kemp. People that read about me in the media just think, it's that rugby league guy. So you might hear a little bit more about me today.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah. 25 games for the Kiwis, more than 250 first-class games, coach of the Warriors, and just as you alluded to then, the media stuff. I'm curious about the media stuff, because you are quite outspoken and you can be quite brash and blunt. And having been on the receiving end of that yourself as a player, I guess, and a coach, do you feel bad sometimes when you give your honest opinions? And
well, I guess you've got to be able to take the good with the bad. I'm not the type of guy. There's a saying, Dom. It goes along the lines of, I'd much rather be hunted like a wolf than ridden like a donkey. And I think when I heard that saying, it's sort of like, as long as I'm comfortable in what I'm saying, it's my opinion. It's not in anyone else's. You're not riding me. You're not getting me to toe the party line, and people that know me know that that's what Tony Kemp stands for. So look, I've been on both sides of the fence, as a player and a coach, and then I went into the media and I got to work with people when I was playing and coaching, and then on the other side of the fence, which was asking the questions. And I guess when you're talking the sport, I spend a lot of time investigating and studying the sport, and I think I've got a fair account of what's going on. So when I do put something out there, I honestly believe it. I'm happy to say, hey, you got that one wrong. But generally, when I say something, especially in that rugby league realm or in sport in general, I tend to say how I see it.
Is it awkward if you ever bump into players after?
100%. Guys have hopped out of like lifts and got a little bit of upset, but I'm not the type of bloke to back down, so I was brought up, in a family environment which was pretty tough. I never had an opportunity to have an opinion when I grew up. My dad was a a really tough guy. He was tough. You know, you're trying to explain. He's 6'4". He had hands like mitts. You know, that I've got big hands. One hand was twice the size of mine, and I wore that quite a lot. But he didn't give me an opportunity to have an opinion or be able to discuss anything. So when you're putting something out there, and yes, it can be brutal. And it can be polarising and honest. It has upset some people. Now I know that, but at the end of the day, you know, like, I wouldn't say that type of thing if I didn't believe it. And there are times when I've run into, you know, ex-players or ex-coaches or footballers, and we've had a crack at each other. And I just say, well, hey man, it's only opinion. Like at the end of the day, and this is one of the things that I remember, Dom, and I say to those people, it's just a game of footy. Like, you know, it's not life or death. It's a game of footy. It's someone with an opinion. And you got to remember too, I've been on the other side of the fence. When you look reading your social media comments, I said this to my partner. You know, like, it's I can laugh at that because of the resilience that I got growing up, where I never had an opportunity to have a discussion or being able to have an opinion, is quite laughable to these people that hide behind a computer and a keyboard warriors. You know what I mean? So. I could tell you a few stories about a few people, but we move on. That same person that hopped out of the lift, you know, he stops and we have a good chat now and a good laugh.
Oh yeah, time is a great healer.
It is. But you know, that's, again, it's for me, knowing the reason why I got into media was because that it was a profile and it was paying the bills. You know, so people hire you for, you know, you to do a job, and sometimes that job can't be always being, you know, ridden like a donkey. So,
well, yeah, I'm from a media background as well, and the worst thing you can do is be beige or vanilla. You just can't. You have to have some hot takes or some strong opinions.
Well, yeah, and that's, you know, generally why people are constantly on the phone to me to try and get my opinion on, especially, you know, some really polarising. I guess events that happen. You know, there's some stuff that I won't touch or go near. But you know, when it's just a game of footy and they want an honest opinion about it, I'll generally give it. Yeah.
Like, what won't you touch or go near?
I got a phone call about a player that in Australia who he murdered his wife and his kids, and he played at the Warriors. I
remember that.
Yeah, and
terrible domestic violence.
Yeah, and he actually played when I coached the Warriors. He trialled for us, and they, you know, the media, as they do, put this together and phoned me up to get a comment. I said, I got nothing to say. You know, like, I don't know anything about that side of things. So you know, you got to be really. I think I've sort of worked out the media through my career. I know when to say something. You know, I've built a profile out of it, and you know, there's things that you touch and there's things that you don't go anywhere near, and that was one of the situations where, you know, they went, oh, he used to coach him, and he'll say something and tell us about the character, and I was like, got nothing to do with me. That
whether he was a good trainer or not, suddenly that's irrelevant at that point.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that.
Okay, so you're born in Northland and you moved to Wairau as a little boy. What are your earliest memories? What sort of a kid were you? Fluent Māori, eh? Māori is your first language?
Māori, yeah. So this is the stuff, you know, why, you know, that I've never ever spoken about this, Dom, but if we go right back, my mum, I was the youngest of 4 kids, and I was born in Whangarei and raised in Kirikiri and Kaikoui. And my siblings, I had 1 sister and 2 brothers.
Norman, William, Diane.
Yeah, and my birth father died when he was 29, so I was only 6 months old. But not long after that, my sister and 2 brothers drowned, and my mum lost the plot. Which is understandable.
Yeah, you know, how can you not?
She went a little bit sideways and ended up putting me with my grandmother. So my grandmother raised me till I was 3, and I always thought my grandmother was my mother. So those are the earliest memories that I've got. And then my mum met my dad, who I called my dad, and we moved to Kirikiri, and it was a different upbringing, you know. Like, so I've gone from the youngest to the oldest. My stepfather Phil's had, you know, another son and 2 daughters, so I'm now in this family. My mum's come to pick me up off my nan and taken me away. I thought, oh, you know, I thought that was my mother, and who's this lady, and we've moved down to Onarahi, and it sort of was a pretty, it's not a unique, we were a state family, living in state homes, and not uncommon to have 12 to 15 people in the house, because my dad was a carer of the family. As if anyone had a problem child, they moved in with us. Dad, with my whāngai brothers, were raised with me, which were my dad's sister's sons. And we lived there in Whangarei till the age of probably 5, 6 was my earliest memories of that. But it wasn't. They were tough memories. My mum was sort of still getting over, in hindsight, some serious loss, and my father was a young father who was raising a young family and had me as well in there. It was really tough. People say, "What was your dad? What was your dad like?" And the people in Waitara know my dad really well, because he's full Kemp. He coached all the kids, coached all my brothers' teams. Everyone, he had a photo up in the club room, and my dad was in there. But he was a hard man, because he had love in this fist and hate in this fist. And I always tell people the story that I'm going to have to give you a hiding, but I'm going to apologise to you and say, I'm sorry because I love you, but I had to teach you a lesson. And for a young bloke growing up like that, it was really confusing. It was like, yeah, man, you're going to give me a hiding, and I'm not talking like you get a strap or a kick up the bum. I'm talking about you getting ragdolled around the place, and then you put on his knee, and he's a big man, and he's cuddling you, saying, "Hey, I'm trying to teach you a lesson," So as my earliest memories of growing up there is just sort of dealing with that type of confusion around these two emotions of love and hate. And one of my outlets, of course, was sport, So getting up on a Saturday morning, listening to the radio, please don't cancel it because of the rain.
I was the opposite.
And the mud.
I just wanted to say, I haven't watched what now. I prayed for it to be cancelled.
No, it was like, man, I don't care. I don't care. Just let me out, get me out. And those were some of the I guess changes really early on in my life. When I look back on it now, you get someone commenting on social media about, "Oh, shut up, Kemp, you dickhead. Don't know what you're talking about." Mate, they don't hurt. They're like raindrops. They're falling off the back of your rain jacket compared to what I was brought up like.
Is your mum still around?
Yeah, she is. Stubborn old bat. She is.
Did you ever talk about what she's been through is just unimaginable adversity and grief. Do you talk about the drowning and the loss of 3 siblings? Yeah, look, I've tried numerous times to talk to Mum about Di and Norman and William and just what she went through, and even my birth father. But she won't go there. I came back in 2000 to coach the Warriors, and in those first 5 years, my siblings never had a headstone. I didn't actually know where they were, so I'm in my 30s before I've actually gone and found them up in Manu in Whangarei where they've been buried. And I've got a good mate of mine, Willie Halligan, who was our gearman at the time, does Laurie Hale's job now at the Warriors. He used to do that for me and Daniel. He worked in a headstone place. He did me up a headstone, and I actually went and put it on my sisters and my brothers, and just so happened that just around the corner my birth father was buried there as well. So when you're sort of looking at that growing up, and in the back of my mind I knew that I had this other sister and these other 2 brothers and a birth father, but I'd never ever spoken about it. My original surname is Ellis, and probably related to the Mark Ellises of the world and all these people, which I've often seen when an Ellis runs out on a sporting field. I'm just sort of, geez, are they my cousins? Like, do we fit in each other's whakapapa somewhere? But I was raised a Kemp. That's when my dad came and, who I've only ever known as my father, and raised me with my mother. I was raised a Kemp, and I've kept that name, and it's just, when I go and talk to my mum, hey, what about this other side? My mum is
pretty much basically taken it with her. You know, she's whether she's dealt with it or not, I can't judge her for that. But I can only ask her so many questions that she will give me answers to, but I won't push her.
Yeah.
You know, because she's already been through enough.
I had the great Mark Graham on the podcast a couple of years ago, and I asked if he wanted to talk about his son who took his own life,
Yes.
and his answer was like, not really, Dom, because if I talk about it, it's painful, so I just try not to talk about it or think about it. Maybe that's the same with your mum.
Yeah,
it's just too difficult.
Yeah, it is, and it is painful. I wouldn't say it's painful. Like, look, two of my whāngai brothers committed suicide. I brought one of them home when I was at Newcastle. He was the same age as me. He was brought up in my house with me, the puck. And then my older brother, Phil, who was named after my father, a couple of years later, he did the same thing, you know. And I never spoke about it for years, you know. I lost the plot the second time when Phil did it, you know. I didn't. He in his note said, you know, just contact my bro and he'll sort everything out. And I got really hurt by that comment. Because I was talking to him and he was intimating to me that he was thinking about giving up, you know. In hindsight, you know, there's a lot of stuff that I've learnt throughout my life that I got to a stage in my life where I was seeing a counsellor and a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and got to understand that there was actually help there that could have been really helpful for these two blokes as well. So I get what Mark Graham, the great Mark Graham, you know, I'll tell you a story about that one too, but the great Mark Graham, when you're losing a family to suicide, painful, like everyone's got a different way. I just, you know, there's a lot of hurt there because you don't know, could you have done anything else?
Yeah.
You know, what did I miss? How come I'm in the, you know, because my story is exactly the same as those two, and why am I still here? You know what I mean? So it's a you know, it's a real. Those are the things that I really haven't told people about, Dom. You know, it's things that you're dealing with. You know, you look at that. My father, you know, my real father died at 29. My father who raised me died at 41. My mum has to sit there. She's lost 2 husbands and 3 kids. She's 84 now, 85,
Wow.
and still stubborn as ever. You know what I mean? And just won't give in. But I'm, you know, glass half full is looking at those things that my mother's got, and you can see, well, yeah, man. Well, a lot of people have told me you're stubborn. You know, you're resilient. And if you're looking at for someone for a bit of inspiration, you look at you know, I don't have to look too far.
Shit, thanks for being so open about that. You've done the work, eh?
Yeah,
What happened? Did it just reach your head in your life?
Mate, well, to be honest, I'm like, there's only a couple of people that know my story. You know, one of them's my best mate, Bruce Sherrick, who runs his own. Him and Posty, Craig Innes, they run their was a man. It used to be called a Sportif. They run their business together. Good fellows. Alan, you know, the trainer, great horse trainer, is another good mate of mine. But yeah, it's sort of, there's not too many. You live with that. You live with that in the background. You know what I mean? So you're getting on with life, and you're trying to build a picture where the picture that you grow up with isn't. You sort of. I would always say to myself, "There's something wrong with this picture." You know, there's something wrong with this picture. You know, why is this picture so distorted? You know what I mean? And it got to a stage in my career when I finally broke down, and it was in 2013. I got into some serious depression, and I locked myself away, and I was getting some help from some good psychologists and psychiatrists. And I remember Emma Holmes, who was my psychologist, she's brilliant. She said to me, look, if it wasn't a matter of if it was going to happen, it was when it was going to happen, and it's happening for you right now. And of course I was really busy. You know, I grew up and I kept busy, and I kept busy from a really young age. But it, you know, going right back to what we're talking about, you know, which is, you know, not about footy, is, you know, the picture for me. I remember going to a mate's place from school one day, and we moved down to Taranaki. I was going on 6. I think I remember Prima 1s at Wairau Central School. And I was fluent in reo, you know what I mean? So we talked Māori. I didn't talk like this. You know, my language when I went to Taranaki was Māori. And when I went down there, I was like, what, these flash fellas talking this this English all the time, you know what I mean? And it got, my mum was fluent in te reo, she still is, and she gave up on it. You know, it was like, well, we've got to fit in and we're not talking like that anymore. And all of a sudden, I'm, you know, growing up in this town and talking like this. And, you know, with state family, waiting for homes. We spent our first 2 years down there in a caravan. So six people in a 15-foot caravan down at the motor camp. But there were 3 caravans. There were two uncles. My uncle's next to my dad. Brilliant time, you know, surfing down there at the bar and fishing and running and that. But we were sort of going around this sort of, you know, waiting for a house. You know, stayed home, can't wait to get into a house. And every time we got in a house, we'd have other family members living with us, and it was busy all the time. And I remember, never forget, one time a young bloke by the name of Frank Rose in my class said, "Do you want to come around?" You know, his play date. Oh, and yeah, I'll come around. And went around. He's just up the road from us, and Waitara's not a very big place. And we drive in there, and it was like, if I could explain the picture that you get in your head, it was like watching an American movie where that 2-story white picket fence and house with a nice driveway, and you open the garage with beautiful cars and bikes. I used to love bikes. In the shed, you know, I only picked mates who had bikes, so I could go and take their bikes and cruise. And I go in there and you know, carpet on the floor, just really, really nice. Things are nice, you know, like, and meal time was nice, and it was discussion and commentary and all this stuff. And you go to sleep and you wake up in the morning and go, man, that was really, really cool. And then not long after that, I go down to the freezing works, the Waitara University of Borthwicks, and you're sitting in there and lo and behold, but who should be working next to my father but Frank Rose dad? And I was the type of kid that looked at things in pictures and went, there's something not right with this picture. You know, is this guy's working next to my dad? Why are we in a state home? Why have you got all those beautiful things there? Your dad's working with my dad, you know? And from that early age was when I sort of made the decision that there must be a different way than the way that I'm living. And I just sort of went on another journey where I had 2 sets of mates. I had my Māori mates and I had my Pākehā mates, you know. And there was this way of doing things with some of my Pākehā and Māori mates, and then this way of doing things with some of my Pākehā and Māori mates. And I was seeing both spectrums of being brought up. And I wrote in a diary a long time. You know, I used to write they call it journaling now, but I used to call it, you know, diary, and I used to have this big red book. And I remember the goal I wrote was to have a 2-story home, you know, that I own, and you know, I've built it and it's mine. And it was from that earlier memory of going to Frank Rose place, and so, you know, from that moment for me, there are certain periods in my life and my football career that I can put a picture to it, and that picture is so strong in my head that it became belief, and then it became a goal, and then it became ticking boxes, you know what I mean, and getting to this place where I said in my head, there must be something different.
Must be more to life.
Yeah, like,
something, you know, better.
I always say, you know, I see, my dad was a tough bugger. You know, he ruled with an iron fist. You know, I got so many hidings. I'm talking, you know, I'm not talking, you know, I'm not talking out of shop here, because it happens. You know, I'm not unique. And, you know, a lot of our whānau that are brought up like this, hiding was nothing. You know, I'll tell you, one time I threw a football through a window. I was practising I used to play halfback. You know, when I was tiny, mate. You know, I used to have long hair down to my ass. You know, no one called me Tony. My name was Mac, and Mac was shortened from smack, because I used to always get a smack. and I was a tiny little blonde-headed whippet, you know, because my birth father was European, and my mum was Māori, so my dad was full Māori. So when they're looking at our family, I'm vanilla compared to my brothers and sisters. But he brought me up like his own, and you didn't do anything wrong, mate. You know, like you want something to fucking cry about, I'll give you something to cry about. Now, don't cry. So you get a crack, and then I'm telling you, don't cry. You want something else to cry about. It was that type of stuff. And I remember throwing a football through a window one day, practicing. I was playing halfback. I fucking used to love rugby, playing halfback for the first 15s at school, and then I was practicing. Sid Gowan used to do that wrap around the back dive pass, you know, so I'm practicing that. Fucking went through the window, didn't it, in the house.
And glass used to be really thin back then.
Real, mate. The thing with it, I didn't notice this, but it was actually, I threw it that well that it went through, but it only, the glass took out, you could tell it was a circle. I never picked that up. So me and my older whāngai brother Phil was home, and my sister was there, and we'd come up with this. I knew I was going to get a hiding if we didn't fucking work this out. So Dad gets home from work, and we'd made up the story that, you know, I'd slammed the window and it broke. Fuck, old man's obviously got out of the car, taken one look at there's a circle in there and said, what's going on? And I've said, I've slammed the window, you know, and it broke. And he went, okay. Said to Phil, hey Phil, what happened? Oh, sorry, uncle. He slammed the window. And he goes to my sister, so Blackie, what happened? And she goes, he threw the football through it. Well, that was it. I got a toweling, mate. I got an absolute bounced around the living room. And the worst thing about that was when I got a toweling, and then he gives me some change and says, now, he used to make me run all the time, you know. Now, get up to that shop, you got 5 minutes. You get up there, dairy, get some butter, and get back here. Don't be. You're on the clock. And I used to always be on the watch, and off I went. And Kinner, Kinner Rogers, who owned the dairy up the road there, knew that this sort of shit was going on. And I ran and grabbed the butter and threw the change at Kinner, you know. And he's still alive today. He still tells that story. And I got home, and the old man would go, yeah, just in time, you know, just in time. And I just, you know, when you go through that sort of stuff, you know, you're sort of thinking, you know, this. Although he was a really tough man, my old man, and I read these things about, you know, guys saying, oh, you know, you're cowards for beating your wife up and you beat your kids up and stuff like that. My dad wasn't a coward, you know what I mean? He just didn't know any better. So he would tell us stories about him being given a hiding. And in my head, my logical head was saying, monkey see, monkey do type thing. And my picture was, there must be a better way. There's a different way. So, you know, you're sort of watching, you're learning, you're looking at all these different habits. You're getting older, and when I look, you know, my old man was this really soft giant. You know Bud Spencer.
Yeah, a comedian.
Bud Spencer, the Italian, he used to hit people on the head with his fist. That was not my old man, you know. Anyone in Waitara, the cops, if they had a problem, they couldn't get rid of the issues, and they called my old man up, you know. He'd stand at the front door and say, what the fuck do you guys want? They used to fucking draw straws to go up and talk to him. He was that guy, you know, so... but he wasn't a coward, you know. He was just brought up that way to raise us the only way that he knew how. And when my dad died at 41, me and him were becoming really close. I was actually, because my pictures were changing all the time, I was having discussions with my father. And this, one of my biggest regrets was that he died at 41, because...
how old were you at the time?
Mate, I was 20.
Right.
I was at Newcastle. I got a phone call after training one day. It broke my heart, because I was building a relationship with my dad since I turned pro, you know, because my dad, and I'll tell you some stories about the footy when we get to there, but my dad just wanted me to be a Kiwi, you know what I mean? So when I started doing that and becoming that player and that person, it was breaking down other doors. You know, it was breaking down other barriers between me and him, and we were starting to talk to each other. And one of my biggest regrets is not having the conversation with him is, why did you do all that stuff? You know, because I think when you think about it, he was 41, you know, and I was getting into my 20s, so we weren't that far apart.
No.
you know. So, but, you know, it taught me a lot, Dom. It taught me, you know, one thing it taught me, there's not too many people I know that come from Waitara that aren't tough, you know. So, you know, there's that toughness that you've got there. There's also that resilience that you've got from that upbringing, you know. But it also really cemented to me about making sure, you know, you're going to have a chance yourself to model one day. When you have kids, how are you going to do that?
And you chose to break the cycle.
Yeah, yeah, and they talk about that a lot. So yeah, to get to that stage when you do finally have kids, you know, and there were habits that I had to break. You know, there was some real habits, and I still struggle today with a lot of them. But it's it's a DNA trait that you picked up and you've been given, and you live with it for so long, and then
like anger or something.
Yeah, anger, and you know, obviously, have lots of anger issues. You know, I was always, you know, well, geez, I'd probably have more than 250 games if I didn't get sent off so many times. You know, but you know, you just never back down.
Yeah.
Like, and you always. I was the type of guy that if you wanted to pick a fight, then okay, well, whether it's going to finish today or it's going to finish in 5 years' time, I was probably the worst bloke to pick it because I would never let it go. But there's reasoning behind some of that too, as well. I've done some of the things in my life that I've done because I don't want my kids to have to continue that trait.
What impact does it have on a child seeing your mum get beaten up by your dad?
Oh, it's it's traumatic. You know, it's hard to describe. You know, like this. You know, it's the sound of skin. You know, and collision. You know, I played a sport where the sound of skin and collision was actually inspiring for me when I used to run into people and bits and pieces like that. But when it's, you know, your parents fighting and you're at a young age watching that type of stuff, it's traumatic. You know, and again, like in 2013 when that all came tumbling down, that wall came tumbling down, it was something that I had to deal with. I got diagnosed with PTSD. And it was all around watching my dad beat my mum up, you know. So, and I always thought I had a hatred for my father, but I was actually worked out that it was for my mother, because my mother was a little bit like me, you know. She would say, "Come on, then kill me," you know what I mean? And I'd be yelling out, "No, stop," and she'd be going, "No, no," and I'd be saying, "Stop, Mum, stop," you know, "Be quiet," and she would continue to say it. And of course, in my head, I couldn't put it together over the years until later on when Emma said to me, "Oh, it's actually not your dad, it's your mum." You know, so I wouldn't wish it on any kid, to be brutally honest. There's, you know, talking to young people now and you know, watching, you know, what's going on in society, especially how tough it is for some of our rangatahi. You know, that I think people actually miss the bigger picture. You know, of like school for me. I love school. You know, I hated education, but from 9 till 3 o'clock, it was my escape. You know, and if we had a great sports team, I was in it. Didn't matter, summer or winter, anything. Remember them. I played cricket at primary school, but not game cricket, you know what I mean? And they said, "Oh, you want to come play cricket?" I was, "Yeah, man, just give me a bat." But that schooling thing for me was such a relief, you know, because you just sort of got away. You got to hang out with your mates, you got to play sport, and you got to see things differently through, you know, different ways that other people lived. And a lot of those guys still today, they're, you know, my best mates. You know, they sort of knew what was going on. They've helped me out a lot in my career, and I'm one of those blokes, like many of us, that could have gone either way, you know. But for a couple of conversations, a couple of pictures being built in my head, that I went, "Oh, actually, yeah, no, I can do that." And it's it's interesting talking about it, because it's the first time that I've really had the courage, I think, to say, oh shit, man, you don't. I've said this to a couple of guys. I said, mate, you don't know me from a fucking bar of soap. So, you know, be really careful what you say, all right? Because I haven't told anyone, you know. And the other thing with that too is that people see me as that footballer. So when I do get big and aggressive and scary, they go, oh, it's that fucking footballer guy, you know.
Brash, loudmouth.
I know,
whatever.
yeah, but they don't really know me, you know. Like they don't know the things that I've done. I bought my first business at 19 in Newcastle. Bought a valet business. They call it Cafe here in Auckland. I had one of those in Newcastle. I've had childcare centres and retirement. You know, developed a retirement licence for a village. You know, owned my own car yard. You know, sort of been a general manager, been a CEO. You know, so there's this other side to me that a lot of people don't know about. Written programs for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and sport. You know, dealt with most of the politicians and you know, just had a chat to Shane Jones yesterday, 2 days ago up in Kirikiri, you know what I mean? Like, you're meeting and greeting people along the way, and you're developing all these skills, and then all of a sudden people say, oh, yeah, you're just that footballer guy, but bro, you don't know me.
No, it's the same with anyone you see. You don't know the backstory. You don't know the scars they've got on their back. You don't know anything about them. Yeah, geez, we've been going for 36 minutes. We haven't actually talked about sport at all yet. Is this tough for you to talk about this stuff?
I think it's, you know, like I said to you, I've had many people know that there's something there and ask me to come on their podcast, but I haven't really been ready. You know, I did an article in a magazine with Dale Husband where I sort of talked a little bit about my mental health, but not really the mechanic behind it, you know. And it is tough, you know, like there's that stigma of what are you saying that for, and don't say that, and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, for anything, it's more for me to be able to say, hey, man, like, you know, I'm actually quite, I'm quite proud that I've had the opportunity to get it off my chest. You know,
well, none of this was your fault.
No, and I don't want my kids to bear it. You know, like if I don't want that trauma to be passed down. I want it to be acknowledged. You know, I love my dad. You know,
how do you?
I do. I love him. I go and visit him where he's buried up in Whakawhiwhi all the time. You know, I'm going to take my brother up there. We're going to go and, you know, his grave's a little bit messy at the moment. We're going to go and sort that out. But I saw who he was. You know what I mean? I experienced who he was, but I actually saw beneath that, before he died, that there was a big, gentle man in there. And again, with my mum, you know, like, the way, there's another saying is that sometimes you just can't change people. So don't waste your time. You know what I mean? And I always thought that I could change my mum, but my mum is, what you get from my mum today at 85 is what you got at 20. And I'll tell you another story about that. My mum lost a plot, and we were living up in Onarahi in Whangarei at the time. I would have been between the ages of 5 or 6. My mum went on a bender for 3 days. And I had a brother who was just started school and 2 sisters. One was in nappies. And she was gone. And I was left there to look after these kids in a state home with one room. So we had one room, and there was a lovely lady there that helped me. But I would put the kids down, take my brother to school, change my younger sister's nappy, put them down in the room, and then I'd go hunting for my mum, who's out, you know, obviously she was in a bad mental space, and try and find where she's at. And that was just sort of, that was life, you know. And when I reflect on it now, like another time, you know, I'm swimming in a waterhole up in Tikipanga, and my family's there, and I'm out there and having heaps of fun with whirimana and ape and poto, and I come out of the water at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm in my stubbies, and where's my family? And they've gone, oh, they're gone. There's a Tikipanga, they live in Waitara. And I said, what do you mean they're gone? And they're gone, you're staying with us. And I can vividly remember sitting in the back of a car in my wet shorts. Like, it wasn't, here's a bag, you know, we're going to pick you up next week. I was at that house for 3 months. So when I reflect on it and look back at it, it's like, well, like, could you imagine a 6-year-old doing that? You know, like, hey, we're just going to leave you there. don't worry about anything. We'll come back and pick you up in 6 months. Or, hey, I'm just going to go and party for 3 nights. Can you look after these 3 siblings of yours and your 6? But for me, it was sort of, in my head, when I look back on it, I always thought that I was older. I was like, well, I must have been older. But when you go back and you put the dots together, well, I didn't move down to Waitara till Prima 1. You know what I mean? So I must have been 5 or 6 when I was doing that. And there's all of those timelines for me. When we're talking about this now, it's just a trigger in my head going, oh, yeah, you remember that. But it's sort of, at the end of the day, Dom, I guess that's what makes you, is all those experience.
It still doesn't make it right, and it's unbelievably sad. Like, how did you not end? Like, when you had kids of your own, how did you not reflect on your own childhood and go, actually, that was really fucked up, and end up with a real chip on your shoulder against your old man?
Yeah, I'd have words to my father, in times when why did you do that? Why do I have to behave like that? I think some of your emotions and your traits that you pick up from that type of behaviour, it's taken me a long, long time to get rid of those. Jealousy, hatred, anger, those really tough emotions, which I found were only really short emotions, because love, empathy, manaki, they are long, sort of longer affected emotions. And the other thing too is, I couldn't hate him. I couldn't hate him because in my head, he was teaching me lessons that I now look back at, and I can tell you a football lesson that sort of got me on my journey and has got me to where I am today. One thing I didn't want to be was raise my kids in a state home. We had no money. I remember, I was the gun footballer in all the football teams. Some Saturday mornings I'd get up, my mum and dad had been out all night, and I'd just have to get myself to the car to get down to Stratford or somewhere like that. And I remember coming back one time and just wishing that the father doesn't stop his car to get a pie, because that's what the kids did, you played your game and then you stopped, because I had no money, what I mean? So these kids would jump out and get pies, and one of the fathers would look at me and go, oh, here boy, give me $1. And I'd go in and get the pie and go, fuck, thank God, like that. But there'd be other times when I'd sit there and I'd just go, fuck, what am I going to do? Like, I can't get out of the car. But that was my life, and it was something that when you look back at, it was our life. And I'm not talking this. This is not unique. This is what is, I think, becoming more unique is people wanting to get out of that life, and doing something about it. And I can tell you a story. Like when we went to a tournament down in Christchurch, and I was in the under-15 side for Taranaki. My dad, he loved. My dad told guys when I was in Whangarei playing up at Eastern Suburbs, he's going to be an All Black one day. You should have picked him in your team. He was that believer that I could play footy. But I went down to Christchurch, and Nitro was playing, and all these Aucklanders jumped off the bus, and an Auckland player there in his jersey with a moustache and a cigarette, under 15s. I'm thinking, fuck, what am I doing here? And I was tiny, on long hair. I was playing half-back. I would have been 35 kilos, 40 kilos, wringing wet, and got towelled up in this under-15 tournament. But I was 12, turning 13, So after that tournament, the old man says, for the whole year, anywhere we went, cousins, family members, friends, that's my boy. He's going to go to Australia next year with the Australian schoolboys. And in my head, I'm going, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I've just been to this tournament. They're giants, The fucking bloke leaning on the post, Lafu. I said, who's that, father? He's fucking a player. I said, I'm never going to get to that size, And he would say relentlessly, no matter who came up to him, that's my son, he will go to Australia next year with the New Zealand schoolboys. So we get, and it just so happened in that 13, 14 year that I grew a little bit, and we go to the tournament, and I play my heart out because my dad said I'm going to Australia and make the Southern Zone, and we beat Northern Zone, and they name the team, they don't name me. And I cry, break down in Manukau rugby league rooms in front of everyone because my heart's broken because my dad had his heart set on me playing for the Schoolboy Kiwis. And he's looked over at me and he's, hey, shut up, come here, you know, like that. I've walked over to him, he's put my head on his shoulders, you know, and he said, oh, you're in. It's just that I had long hair. And he said, oh, we've got to cut your hair because they said they can't get into any leagues, which is bullshit. You can't get into leagues clubs with long hair, you know. So the power of the picture, again, when I look back on things, is that, you know, this man that was such a tough bugger was actually giving me belief, you know, which I've had ever since. And I've taken that train of thought in most things that I've done and gone and built the picture and built the goal and the vision and gone, okay, well, this is where I'm at, this is what I want to do with it, and try to get to that next step. And that's where my football career started. So a lot of people, when they say, what's your football career like? You know, like, well, I made every New Zealand team under the sun from the age of 15. So I played 15s when I was 14. I captained the 15 schoolboys the following year. I made the 17s 2 years in a row from 15, 16. Then I made the junior Kiwis at 16, 17, 18. And then I went straight into the Kiwi side. So, you know, my career journey from that, hey, he's going to play for the schoolboys the following year, every single year after that was picking up a black jersey. And again, that, you know, that journey to go to professional in my 15th. So I went to Australia for that 15 jersey that he said. And Parramatta were my favourite team, so you Ray Price, Eric Groth. Eric Groth was my favourite player. Mick Cronin, Peter Sterling, Paul Taylor at the back, Steve Aller, could name them. And I remember dreaming, mate, I was just about to kick off for Parramatta. My mum woke me up, I was 12. Fucking, what are you doing, mum? Fuck, I'm just about to kick off for Parramatta. That's how strong this picture was in my head. And but I ended up on the hill in Cronulla, in the Cronulla Hill, when I went over as a 14-year-old for the New Zealand schoolboys. And our bullet took us to a Cronulla Parramatta game, and I was just couldn't wait to see Parramatta. But I'm watching these two Cronulla dudes, ragdoll blokes in the Parramatta. I mean, like it's you know those cartoons where they pick someone up by the back of the collar and they're going just smacking them over like that. And I was sitting there going, who the fuck are those two? Like that. Find out they're Kurt and Dane Sorensen.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're from New Zealand. And that moment, the bullet said to me, that's Kurt and Dane Sorensen, they're from New Zealand. I went, that's what I want to do. And I was 14, and I was standing on the hill. And I remember going back to school, at high school, Mr. Curter, rest his soul, our maths teacher said to me, Kemp, I was a little bit naughty at school and got quite a few of the Kemp listen here type thing. And he said to me, Kemp, what are you going to do when you grow up? You know, giving me the, you know, if you don't do your maths, you're not going to have anything. And I said, I'm going to go and play professional rugby league. And he said, you're a dreamer. And it actually stuck with me. And I was like, yeah, I'm fucking dreaming about that all the time, you know what I mean? And to his benefit, Mr. Curter, I ran back into him down at the freezing works in the butcher shop, in my 20s, early 20s. And he actually come up to me and he said, oh, you made it. And I said, yep. I said, I told you I was going to be a professional sportsman. But yeah, that's that sort of period there when I was growing up and building, you know, where I wanted to be. Yeah, I could actually, like I said to you right at the beginning of the conversation, I could actually put that picture and that time in that spot. And I still remember it, you know. Thank God I haven't got CTE.
You mentioned earlier that you were like goal setting or journaling. Where did that come from? Like a Māori teenager from Wairau in the 1980s. It seems pretty out there. Who taught you how to do that, or where did that idea come from?
A lot of it came because I was a dreamer, mate. We got a place down there where our rugby league club is in Clifton Park. Our forefathers had this wonderful idea to put our rugby league club up there, and it's the biggest. It's right opposite the high school. It's the biggest green space down there in Waitara, and you can play all your sport there. You know, so we played our touch, our softball, our league. all of our school sports were on this field, and I used to go down there and lie. I love the dark, so I used to go down there at night and lie there take my dog down and lie down there and just look up at the stars and just dream, and then I just started journaling, So back in those days, journaling started when you were in intermediate, when the girls would give you those journals and it was about you, and they'd write the questions, and it'd say, what's your name, what's your nickname, where do you live, what do you want to do, who's your girlfriend, data, all that sort of stuff. It was these books that they'd hand out. And so I sort of went, well, shit, I'm just going to write my own. And I would just write down things inside my own journal. And I'd write about the girl I was seeing, you know what I mean, about the sports teams, about shit, my dad, I've got this training. I trained for the junior Black Sox, alongside Johnny Lomax and Mark Roberts and Dean Rice and them, because I was a good softballer too. And I remember just training too hard, I had fucking league to do. I was playing first 15, I had the softball training, I remember journaling, all that stuff, and I'm just burning myself out here. But what happened from there was then people would say something to me and I would put it into writing. Okay, and I just knew that, I'll write this down so I can go back and have a look at it. And it wasn't just sport, it was life, I don't want to do this, or I want to do this, or whatever.
Just processing your thoughts.
And that was basically it. And it was for me to look back on it. And I'll tell you a funny story about these two stories to that. One of them is my best mate, Bruce Sherrick. I was going down to see a girl one night. It was a school night. It was a Saturday night, and it was me heading down to her place to see her, to have a bit of fun, and he pulls up beside me. He was the first 15 captain. I was a halfback, he was second 5'8", in the first 15 at school. And we sort of knew, we were friends, but we weren't friends, you know what I mean? Like, he was a bit of a buffhead, the size of Bruce was, he's not a very big man, but he was that size when we were at school, so he's a big man for his age at that. He's got a big head, made him look bigger. But he sort of pulled up in his old man's Holden ute, I think it was. He winds a window down just outside the marae there, and he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just going to have a bit of fun." He said, "Oh, why don't you come to a party with me?" And I ended up jumping in the car with him, and I had an absolute ball. He's a fucking great character, good fun, and from that moment on we became best mates. But that night was really defining for me, because he looked at me and he said to me, we're driving home, he said, "What are you fucking doing?" He said, "You can play, man. You can play. It's your ticket. Come on, knuckle down." He's an agent now, but he was saying way back then, knuckle down, you can make it. He could see it in me. So that was another one of those pictures. But I put that in my diary. And from that moment on, then the diary started to change. It started to go, right, well, what can I get out of this? And if I take that moment, so that moment I was 15, and I take it to sitting out at Coatesville. Out here, got a block out of Coatesville when I came back to coach the Warriors. I'd bought a piece of land out there, building my home, and I'm ready. Open up a box that we had in storage, and I pull out, here's my journal. Oh, so this journal, I was 15. And inside this journal, I said, it goes, I want to be a professional sportsman. When I finish, I want to own a 2-story home on my own piece of land. I don't want the bank to own it. I want to have 2 kids, and I want to be happy. And guess what? When I opened that box up was when we were taking the furniture out to put in the house that I just built out at Coatesville, and both my kids were at Coatesville Primary School.
How was that? Was that emotional?
Well, it was the power of goal setting. It was the power of pictures. That it was like, I put that in a box at 15, 16 when I went on my journey, because I went to Wellington first and ended up at Newcastle, then to England. It sat in that box for that long, and then we pulled it out and I started reading it, and I was like, whoa, I actually wrote what was actually going to happen. So, I talk to a lot of kids about that, about the power of mindset, and the power of belief and the power of putting it down. And I still have my own vision board today, which is, always changing, because they change a hell of a lot quicker these days than they were when you're a kid.
What's on it today?
Oh, it's a freedom is one of my signs on it. Freedom is the ability to do what you want, when you want, how you want, and all the things around that are what I'm currently doing. So I'm developing a 70-acre property up in Kirikiri at the moment. We're buying investments, that will put us in a position that when we go to sell them, that we can actually enjoy the last piece of our life. You know what I mean? But I don't want to be that guy in the cemetery that's got everything and leaves it to everyone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I want to be a guy that is happy as you get older, especially with my body too, because the other thing that rugby league gave me is a pakaru body.
What does pakaru mean?
Broken.
Oh, is it broken? You look in great shape.
Yeah, well, I keep moving. I think movement is really important. I could be doing a bit more, but I've had a really bad run with my knees lately, and as you can see, I've got a couple of things in my hands from carpal tunnel bits and pieces. But yeah, I always knew, Dom, like when you finish playing footy, that I was going to pay the price. And people say, what would you do differently? Well, I wouldn't do nothing differently around the footy, but around the injuries I would have. I wish we had the medical care that they've got today that we never had back in our days. Yeah. And that's a whole new story, that one.
Yes, so you moved to Australia to play for this brand new club called the Newcastle Knights when you were 18. This is pre-internet as well. This is when phone calls were like $11 a minute or something. Yeah. What was that like, going from Waitara to Newcastle at 18?
I went to Wellington, so I pulled in the car with the old man and I said to him, I'm going to Wellington. Howie Tamati took me down there. He went down there as a coach, and Newcastle came to Hut Rec one night to look at Sam Stewart. Who was their inaugural captain for the Knights. A great bloke, Sammy. He was sort of a father figure to me, not only at Randwick and Wellington, but when I went to Newcastle. And when I found out that they were coming to look at Sammy, I put as much liniment on my legs as possible in a headband so that they would notice me. And I actually had a shocker that night. It was against Eastern Suburbs. I tried to chip over Fitu Henry, who was 6'8", and when he put his hands up, he was 7'2". Caught the ball, score in the corner, but the chairman at the time said, yeah, we'll take Sammy and we'll have that idiot that keeps trying things out there and can't pull it off, which was me. And that's how I ended up at Newcastle. And then we devised the rookie scheme and wrote it to the New Zealand Rugby League, and I always had this mindset that if I get to Australia, I'm never coming home. So we developed the rookie scheme to get to Australia. Once I got there, I took up the New Zealand Rugby League in a battle of the court case, took them to High Court, and took them to court for restraint of trade, which is actually, my son's a lawyer. When he went down to do law down in Dunedin, the teacher said, oh, you're not related to that Tony Kemp? And Noah goes, yeah, that's my dad. And he goes, oh, do you think he'll come down? We actually do contract law on his case. Back in '89 against the New Zealand Rugby League. So, we did that and went to Newcastle, and I love Newcastle. I can still remember my very first carry in first grade, and getting absolutely coat-hangered by Kerry Hemsley in that great Balmain side that went on to play in the final that year against Canberra. But yeah, it was like the final pieces of the jigsaw puzzle when I was standing on that hill in Cronulla coming together. And then I can still smell the jersey when I put it on, and running out. And even though, they've got a picture of that tackle from Kerry Hemsley in my first carry, just going, man, this is it. You've got to that stage. And I spent 6 years at Newcastle. In 6 wonderful years, and went to the finals a couple of times. We didn't quite win anything. I always said that Newcastle win a grand final in the first 10 years, and they won it on their 10th year. But I got some great memories there, great people. Got to mentor Joey Johns. He mentions that in his book, I think. One of my friends told me, and Matty Johns was a good mate of mine too, and he was a neighbour, and he actually last year sent me a text and said, hey Kempy, I just wanted to thank you, mate, for always given me some time, when I was there, because none of the other blokes would. There's a few dickheads there at the time too, but
just culture of the time.
Yeah, it was just, mate, it was, I got called a black cunt so many times over there. I was like, fuck, mate, you guys have got a tan that's darker than me. But yeah, it was a funny time. I was talking about that Mark Graham story, like Mark Graham is the best player that we've had in this country. You know what I mean? And I remember coming up the stairs in North Sydney, and it was like a god, you know what I mean? Like, here I am, this 19-year-old kid walking up in my Newcastle jersey. Mark Graham standing at the front with his Bears jersey on, ready to run the ball out, and I'm sitting there going, oh fuck, please don't come down my side today. And you're looking at these greats that you're a kid going, shit, these are your idols, and then the next minute you're playing against them and you're playing alongside them. And that'll be something that I'll never forget, is having the opportunity to play with some really, really great, what I think, footballers.
Legends of the game.
Absolutely. And there's a ton of them. Kurt, people say, who's the toughest bloke you ever played with? Kurt Sorensen, without a doubt. You know what I mean? I've seen him playing in England, and I've seen the English scrum break up. I was playing fullback at the time, and the English scrum broke up. And all of the boys stood up and said Kurt, and when Kurt pulled his head up, all the English boys put their head back in the scrum. You know what I mean? I was like, fuck, okay, well, I'm behind him. So, yeah, there were some great players.
That the court case that you talked about before, taking the New Zealand Rugby League to court and winning, it feels like a dangerous move at the time. Beginning of your career, it could have potentially cost you a spot in the Kiwis.
Well, yeah, like they try to make a scapegoat of me. I actually spoke to a few players and said, look, this is what we're doing. You guys want to be in? And a few of them said, yeah. But as soon as I pushed the go button, of course it was going to cost money, and they all pulled out. And I was on the dole. So I played rookie season for Newcastle. I didn't have a contract. I was on a dole, and I had no money. And I was taking these guys to the court in New Zealand. Of course, back in those days, you had to pay your way. So I had to win. I had to win. So it was daunting. I was 20, going on 21. It cost me, in real money, 74,000 Australian dollars at the time. When I got a quote, they said it was going to cost me 25k. The actual bills are closer to 80. The first 3 years of my contracts were to pay that bill, because that's after tax. So I've got to earn, pay my tax, and then pay that bill. But it was sort of,
was it a principle thing?
If you don't know me, if you know me, then you know that principles are pretty. It's the principle. You know what I mean? It's sort of, I find it really hard to step out if I'm thinking something's wrong. So we did that here, talking to the High Court. It cost me 3 years of earning capacity. In hindsight, when you look at it, that's probably the reason why the Warriors came to town, because that was in 89 and 95 they come into the competition because of the explosion of Kiwis that went to the competition. You talk to the Mad Butcher and the Dean Lonigans of the world that actually can see that, so they saw that, what they were doing was stopping our talent from growing. And if I look at the catalyst to where New Zealand as a playing nation of players are at the moment, we would have still been well behind the eight ball if that decision wasn't made back in 89. And now, we always wanted to be number one. I think once we get there, and if the international law doesn't keep fucking around with the rules, New Zealand is going to be hard to knock off.
Why didn't you just put that in the too hard basket, though, like most people would have done?
Well, it was the principle, and I look in the court case. I remember standing up in the box and talking to the judge, and he said, "Well, what will you do if you don't win this case?" And I said, "Well, I'll probably I'll go back to Waitara and work at the freezing works." Because mate,
would have been a career ender.
Well, yeah, because see, back in those days, you had to have played 6 tests or been on 2 tours. So by the time, it was harder to get in the Kiwi team than to get out of it. So the average age of players that turned professional was 26. So I retired from the Kiwis, and after 25 tests, I was 26. I used the rest of my career to earn money. So there was no other way for me other than at that time to go and try and win this case, because it made the difference of me having this dream of being a professional sportsman or going home and working at the freezing works. I just didn't want to do that.
I've never met your mum. All I know about her is the way you've described her. But shit, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it?
No. And so much that me and her are more best mates than mother and son. You know, like we have a good old laugh, even though she hasn't got her hearing aids, and half the time I talk to her. But yeah, look, you know, you look at mum. See, mum. Both my parents were you know, factory workers. You know, my mum worked for Tegel Poultry, but she was the union rep. So she was the person everyone went to if there was something wrong, and mum would stick up for them. You know, my dad was a hard man of town. You know, if there was anything wrong, they'd go to him. So the apple didn't fall too far from the tree with that. You know, I could tell a story in England when I come and I broke my arm 2 or 3 times, and I come back to training, and we had 3 coloured blokes in our team at the time, and I walked into the mess room where we watch videos and chill out, and I said to Faz and Daz, I said, what's going on? And they said, oh, he can't call us black cunts, mate. Like, this is talking about the coach, you know. So I'm coming back trying to get ready to play, and my mates, who I wasn't captain at the time, but I was the guy that people would come to, and he said, well, he can't call us black cunts. And so I stepped out of the room and had to get inside my head and go, well, what do you do? You know, and I'm talking to myself, well, what do you do? Do you stand up for that which is wrong, or do you let it go and just get on with it, be ridden like a donkey? Yeah. So I walked back into the room and I said, okay, boys, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to go into that room, I'm going to tell him he can't do that, and I'll probably be done. All right? That'll be me. In my head, I'm going, no way in the world if you're a coach, you can someone come and say that to you and you've got to get rid of him. So I actually went into the room, I said to the coach, hey man, you know, what's going on? Hey Kempy, how you going? And I said, what do you want? I said, I just got to tell you, mate, you can't say that. All right, that's wrong. Got blokes in that room in there, they're really upset. I didn't say it. So you're going, well, fuck, they said that and you're saying that. I said, oh, hey, I'm just the messenger. Just can't say that, you know. So that was me. Like, you know, the court case is the same thing. Hey, well, that's wrong. You know, it's a restraint of trade. My trade is football. Why are you stopping me from playing football? And there were so many times in my career that's happened, you know. So, and on that occasion, sure enough, the following year, I'm punted, you know. I'm heading off to Wakefield. Hey, it is what it is, you know. And it's probably, Dom, to be honest, and I've said this to a couple of people, there's probably more bridges that I've burnt because of having that stance than towing the party line. And I got to say that I'm comfortable with it, you know. You know, as I'm getting older, I would have done it a little bit differently. But yeah, if the principle's strong within me that, you know, there's a difference between right or wrong, there's no grey area. Yeah.
Oh, good on you, because it takes a considerable amount of courage to do that.
Yeah, or you're dumb, you know. Or you're not very smart.
Sucker for punishment.
Yeah.
Do you recall the moment you got named in the Kiwis for the first time? Was it a TV announcement, a phone call? How does it happen?
Yeah, no. It's announced. It's announced over. Look, one thing we didn't do back then was announcements. You know, like it's generally announced after trials. You know, I was meant to play in the '88 World Cup at Eden Park. I got hurt in the last trial, hurt my shoulder, and that's when Gary Mercer went to fullback. Had a shocker back there, Alfie Langer. I remember Gary Freeman and Ming Mercer having a crack at each other at a test dinner, and it was all around that Alfie Langer sidestep that went around him at Eden Park. You know, it was quite hilarious. But I got injured, and then in '89 they played the Australian series down here, and they named the team after, you know, a certain round which I got named in, and got named opposite Kevin Edo, who was my best mate, you know, that we went through all their age groups together. So he'd made it in '88, and I made it in '89, so we got to play with each other. And on the back of that, some legends in that series too, you know, at the end of the year went to England, and Kurt Sorensen was still playing, and Huey McGahn, and Dean Bell, Darryl Williams, you know, Mark Elia, all those guys when I was just a young fella. So it was a pretty proud moment, you know. My dad was still alive then. You know, he'd drive his car to, you know, he didn't like flying, he'd drive his car down to Christchurch to watch, and up to Rotorua to watch the second one, and I think the third one was here at Mount Smart. So yeah, I remember those games, those tours, like they were yesterday when you think about them. And again, it was, there's moments in your career where you can remember. I remember pulling on my Waitara Premier jersey for the first time, and I idolised those guys. They were my club. My childhood club. Grew up watching all these legends play, and then when I got to wear the Premier jersey, I remember pulling that jersey, and I still got it. And then I went to Randwick, and I remember the first game I pulled it on for them. Like, I smelt it, I could feel it. And the same thing went for all the Kiwi jerseys. So I buried all those jerseys with my father when he died in 91. So every jersey that I had, representative jersey up until that stage, I put in a coffin with it. And it's quite funny because all my cousins, when they come down, and my dad's lying there in state, and they've seen all these jerseys, and they're pulling them up, and I'm going, keep your hands off those. They're not for you buggers. So yeah, he was a real proud man about wearing that black jersey. So yeah, somewhere up there in Whakawhiwhi, if you pull up that man out of a hole, there's some decent jerseys down there.
There was a hell of a way to make your test debut. Like Wally Lewis, captain of Australia, Mel Meninga on the side. Are you familiar with the term imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I am.
Were you shitting yourself playing for the Kiwis for the first time, or?
Yeah, look. My belief to get there was really strong. I guess when you're looking across the paddock at that lineup, you look at that lineup which you've been watching for years. The Meningas and the Currys, the Langers, the Wally Lewis, marked Wally and Mel a number of times in the. I think what I got to learn was that we really didn't give ourselves enough of a chance. We were sort of beaten before we got onto the pitch most of the time because our country would write us off as underdogs, you know. And I always thought that, I always thought we were tougher than them, but they were more skillful than us, and they threw caution to the wind where we were not as built like that to do things because of the competitions and that they had. So I had no problem running around out there. I'd been in that performance grade for so long that I couldn't wait to get there. But it's sort of when you finish, you ask yourself the question: could I have done anything better or done anything else? And that's a really hard question to answer, Dom, because it's a team sport, and you get so many situations during a game where you've got to take your chances, and if it isn't for a slip of the pass or a knock on or someone doesn't see you, the opportunities pass you so quickly. And I've watched a couple of those games, with the advent of the internet now, where you can go back and look at some of those games, and in my head I go, oh shit, that's right, if I could have just passed that ball, it would have been different, But I enjoyed it. Every minute of wearing that black jersey, and I've been a big advocate for that. You would have heard me talk about bleeding black, and I think what Benji Marshall did when he came out of the Australian schoolboys to choose New Zealand. I think just recently with Kalen Ponga coming and saying that he wants to represent his country. I think they're iconic statements which this country needs. And Origin will always be Origin. Our country's always supported an Origin, but that black jersey, we've got to be careful that we preserve it because it's pretty special.
Throughout your playing career, what was the most lucrative contract you ever had?
Super League. So, and I was lucky, I played up in Newcastle, and then I headed up to the UK. I played a test series, and I fell out with a coach. With no doing of my own, but I got back from a test series, and one of the players was out of form, and when I went back into the change room to read the team sheet, I was in second grade, and the coach had pulled me out, and I'm going, why am I in second grade? I've just played a test series, you know what I mean? And he said, my contract was up. And he said, you're going to have to play loose forward next year, compete against Mark Glanville. I'm putting this guy in the centres this week, and you're playing second grade. And I said, what do you mean? I've just finished playing a test series. And he said, no, that's what I want to do. And I didn't even train. I just jumped in my car, went home, I wanted to hit him. I was that annoyed. But I got in my car, went home, and Tawera had spoken to me about going to England and playing for Castleford. And so I phoned T up and I said, "Hey T, I'm coming, man." And that's how I ended up in England. And I went to England and I played in the Super League war, when Super League ARL war, and I ended up in the Super League contracts. And I ended up at Leeds with Posty. And Dougie Lawton, who Posty may have spoken about, great bloke Dougie, you couldn't understand him, but he knew money. And he basically just said to me, "What do you want?" And I said to him, "This is what I want." And I was probably the second highest paid player at Leeds at the time, and they talked about having this contract locked up in the as safe at Leeds, and everyone thought it was Tawera. But only me and Dougie knew it was me, and I ended up going to Leeds, and I actually renegotiated that contract with Dean Bell, because Dean Bell came to Leeds the following year. Dougie lost the job and Dean Bell got it, and I went back to the Crushers, and the ARL were trying to get me to renege on my Super League contract to stay in the ARL competition, which I'm glad I didn't, because the Crushers folded 2 years later. And Dean Bell said, "Oh no, I want you to come back to Leeds." So I ended up going back and I renegotiated it again. With the new owner, and that's a funny story. He walks in, Gary Hetherington at the time, with Paul Caddick, and he says, "Hey boys, the very first time they did this in England, we're going to have a top 25, and we're sitting around me and Kev, like, we've been around for ages, so we knew sort of what was going on." And as soon as he said top 25, I knew what he was thinking, he knew what I was thinking, and he then goes, "Okay, but you're going to come and tell me where you think you sit in the top 25. Well, Iro beat me to his office, so I had to sit outside the office in the line. I was next to go in after Iro, and sit down. Iro comes out. He's giving me the high five. I'm going, "Wanker," and he goes sit down. And Gary goes, "Rightio, Tony, where do you think you sit?" And I said, "Well, I was sitting number 1, but now I'm number 2. And he just started laughing. He said, "Yep, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to bundle it all up." And I said, "Yeah, I'm happy with that." And it was back then I decided to, the 95 World Cup, that was my last test series. Because at 26, I just had a young girl. And I thought, well, international football doesn't pay you a lot of money, and it does when you go on those tours, and it does take it out of you, and your form can dip at club. And I just, putting logic together, thought, well, if I get 4 or 5 good years out of my contract, I'll just earn money so I can set myself up for later after footy.
Yeah, smart decision in hindsight.
Oh hell yeah. And to be honest, Dom, I 5 or 6 years in the Kiwis, I was probably done too. I played a lot of international footy since the age of 15, and I wanted to enjoy my footy. And when I went to Castleford, and although I had the injuries at Leeds, and I used to love playing up in England, it was there was no media looking at you, because it's all football and the media up there, and you could just go out there and enjoy yourself. And I found it really hard to leave England, So when we decided to finally pull up stumps and come back to New Zealand, I'd had such a good time there, because I went up to Doncaster when I was 17. And they had a program they called Another Bloody Sunday, where they hadn't won a game, and I'd sent them a letter, and they took me on, and we ended up finishing the top 4. So I can still go into Doncaster now, and people are still talking about those days. And wow. I took a mate up there, Carl Hall, who's from Auckland, and he now owns a club. Never come home. He's been up there for 30-odd years. So, England's got, there's a couple of places, a couple of people up there, pretty special place in my heart up there.
You got into coaching real early, eh? You started coaching while you were still playing?
I was, because I was a 5'8", so I was always delivering coaching messages and talking to the coaches about strategies and all that anyway. So it was a natural progression. And funny story, like when I was at Leeds, I snapped my arm a few times, and Gary Hetherington got me into the room and said, "Oh, look, we want some of the money back." And I said to him, "Well, that ain't going to happen. Not my fault. I've got a broken arm. I broke it playing for you." And I said to him, "But I'll tell you what I will do is I'll coach your A team, which is the New South Wales Cup." And in that side was Kevin Sinfield, Gareth Ellis, Adrian Morley, some really good kids, and we ended up winning the comp. So that was my foray into coaching. And then the conversation about the coloured guys and all that, and then I ended up at Wakefield as a player coach, and that's how I got on my coaching journey. So I player coached at Wakefield, then I came home, and I was on my way back down here when Posty called me and said, "Oh, mate, have you thought about coaching the Warriors?" And I said, "Oh, I'm probably going to head back to Newcastle because I had a property over there." And he said, "Oh, Ridgie and them are setting up a club down here, man. You maybe talk to Ridgie." And I said, "Oh, yeah, okay then." So we ended up having a conversation with Ridgie, and really quickly, I came in for an interview with Ridgie and Mick Watson at the time. And they only had 4 people hired at that stage. It was Patty, the front office lady, Ando, Daniel Anderson, Mick and Ridgie. So there were 4 people at the club, and Ridgie wasn't hired, he was an owner. And I walked in, and we had Ridgie, good bugger, been great mates for a while. Didn't put any acid on. He said, "You're just going to have to convince Ando," and I walked in there, told him what I thought, and the rest is history.
Mm-hmm. You were 34 when you became coach of the Warriors? Assistant coach or head coach?
34 when I became head coach, so I was one of the youngest NRL coaches. And
it's wild, eh?
And look, I've spoken to a few of the players, like back in those days, they obviously at the back end of their careers are going, "Fuck, Kempy was this age when he was coaching the Warriors, and it was sort of a really tough one for me, Dom. Like we had all that success earlier on, and went to a grand final, just missed the second one with beaten by Penrith, and then in 2004 had that bad run, and Ando resigned and I took over. But I, if I always say, what would you have done differently? Well, I wouldn't have taken it. But I didn't have the advice at the time to sort of take a back seat, stay in your assistant role, keep developing yourself as a coach. And I was caught between, well, I may never get this chance again, so take it type thing. And in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have taken it,
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, though, isn't it?
But it is for a lot of things, I could tell you hindsight around 1,000 different stories. But, mate, like I said, when I've seen so many people, I'll never forget the interview I gave when I lost the job. I'd often thought about exit strategies, and I've seen so many people handle them poorly. And, one of the things I was never, ever going to allow myself to do was to bag the game of rugby league, because if you think about the story and what I've been talking to you about, where I came from, it was rugby league that was a catalyst to a big change in my life. And if I was to sit there at 14 and say, guess what, I'm going to be one of the youngest coaches to ever coach a professional team in New Zealand called the Warriors, you'd be throwing stones at me down at the Wairau bar, you know what I mean? It was, so I was never ever going to take that away, and I thank the sport, even sitting here with you, it's generally because I've had a career in rugby league, like rugby league's given me enormous opportunity throughout my career.
So the Warrior stuff, it's a long way in the rear view now, like 21 years, 22 years. God, where does the time go, eh?
It flies.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
ChatGPT, AI, describes your time at the Warriors as turbulent and controversial. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, it was, like you got to think about, Ando was only 35, so, and we didn't have 14 different coaches, there was me, Ando, a trainer and a manager. So that was running the team, and we had some success there. We had more success than we had failures. Yeah. But it was turbulent on those back end of the years, because what happened to Ando, I had to pick up and run with a team for the rest of the year that wasn't fit. And get them to the back end of the year, and then we had to try and rebuild it to get it through the next year. And if you follow the scores, we missed it by a whisker. Yeah,
there were so many close games.
So many close games.
Was that like a lack of fitness in the team in the final quarter of the game? Or?
No, 2004 was. 2005, it's we missed a couple of decisions, and we could have wrapped up games and stuff like that, but we were rebuilding. And I always knew that I was having to battle to hold my position. So if I didn't make the 8, I was probably going to be punted, So Ivan Ivan and Kempo were my assistant coaches then. Their journey was starting. They brought in John Hart. I'd never forgive John Hart for the way that he treated me. He used to wine and dine me up at his house with breakfasts and all that and talk about shit and blow wind up my ass, and then he sacks me. And I'll never forgive him because, I'm a Kiwi, and I thought that in those first 4 or 5 years, if you're looking for a young coach that actually had more success through that time with Daniel than adversity to bring the team back, and me and Ivan were starting to do that, they may have given me a longer tenure to do that and sort of grow alongside Ivan again. But he was in my books just a total dickhead about the whole thing.
Who's that? Harty?
John Hart, yeah. So
still bad blood there now?
Yeah, it's still like...
Have you seen him since?
Mate, I don't want to see him. I would never do that. That's the type of person I am. It's black and white. It's sort of the way that he sort of, was grooming Ivan for the position was, and I've never spoken about this before. It was really hard to take. Because I put my life into that club for so many years. So, but again, they say there's only 2 types of coaches. You know what I mean?
Those that have been... Brad Thorne, I had him on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he told me this. I hadn't heard it before. You've been sacked, or you're about to be sacked. Yeah, Is that the same?
So I was, the reality was that I was again, going to be moved on. The thing I remember sitting up in Wairau, Harvey had a place up there, and he told me, "Oh man, we're going to go with Ivan. We're going to have a media interview this afternoon." And everyone knew before me. That's the other thing that got me. Everyone knew before I did. And I remember sitting up there, and I was having a cry in the car, and shit, my coaching career's over, and I just thought. Man, and really quickly, I talked to my mate. I gave Bruce a call, and I talked to him, and he was saying, get your thoughts together and come back, let's really handle this right. And by the time I journeyed from there back to the club, I was on a high again because I just went through my career, and I just thought about the things that I'd done and had been able to achieve, being Polynesian too, being Māori and those type of key positions. Half the stories I don't tell the boys, because they wouldn't believe me. But yeah, and I just thought, man, you're 35, you've had a hell of a run. And I think the way that exit strategy worked for me by handling it correctly has sort of driven things that have since been really good for me. I've got numerous phone calls from businesses that wanted to hire me. There's so many correlations between sport and business these days. I've ended up managing businesses for people and just using team building and building great teams and getting cultures right and stuff like that. And part of me, when I look back on it now, at that age, I was just a kid. Like the Tony Kemp today would be handling it totally different to what that kid handled it. But when you say, would you do it again? Mate, you have a look at that team that we coached. Like Clinton Tupi, arguably the best centre at the time in the world. The 2 wingers, Francis and Henry. Campo is on the phone to me every day. You know what I mean? He's actually over here this week. Wants to catch up for a beer, but I'm heading to Aussie on Thursday.
Kevin Campion.
He's an absolute legend, mate. But you just have a look at the calibre. Donk, the manager, he's on the phone to me. Ando, I called Ando up. So Ando's had that accident,
So Daniel Anderson, I think this was New Year's Eve 2022.
Yeah,
surfing accident.
Yeah, I got a phone call, Ando, he'd actually died, and they brought him back to life on the beach. And so I'm like, man, I've got to go and see him. So me and my partner headed over to Sydney, and I'm like, he's in a wheelchair. He can't. He's quadriplegic. He can move. He can move. Okay now. But when I went to see him, I caught a taxi out to the hospital. And of course, we were young, so we never really handled our goodbye that well. Like he said, roll with the punches. That's all he said to me when he left the club. So, he's gone from working really close to me as an assistant coach, head coach, and then all of a sudden just left me in the lurch, you know what I mean, and said to me, roll with punches, and I didn't really forgive him for that, you know, because I picked up the mantle and had to run with it and copped all the shit that went beside it as well. And so we hadn't really spoken to each other, and I heard the accident, I went to Sydney, I said, I'll go and see him. So I jumped in a cab, went out to the hospital, and I phoned him, and I said, what are you doing? You know, hey man, how you going? I said, just thinking about visiting you. He goes, yeah, just give me some warning, and yeah, you know, that should be fine. And I said, okay, here's your warning. I'm in the car park. He's gone, oh shit. Okay, so he's rolled out, mate. I said, I'll wait for you up at the cafe. So he's rolled up in the cafe half an hour later. Oh yeah, mate, we pissed our pants for a good hour and a half. Just what we were saying to each other was, mate, we were so fucking young, weren't we? Like that, you know, making all these really big decisions on football teams and strategies and stuff like that. And we ended up, you know, building a bridge and laughing, and I spilt coffee over him because I had to drink it. I should have fucking thrown it all over him, to be honest. But yeah, we had a really good catch up, and you know, they were for me some of the best times of my football career. You know, getting to the grand final for the first time with the Warriors, just unlucky to lose it. You know, we were right in that game for a long period of time. So 2002 grand final against the Roosters, 80,000 people in Sydney. What's that dressing room like after the game? It's a morgue. You know, there's no difference between winning and losing, Dom. I don't care what people tell you. You know, you win, mate. You're heroes. You know, everything tastes better and, you know, looks better and feels better. And when you lose, mate, you know, you're sore and you want to get home. You want to, you know, get some feedback and get on and, you know, like they say, you know, you had 7 days to correct it. Well, you had to wait a whole year to get to the next one. So,
but falling over at the last hurdle, there's no shame in that, right?
No, well, if you think about it in a nutshell, the year before they didn't have a team, so they basically gone under, and they were re-signing players and trying to build a team. Like I said, when I got hired, I was the 4th person hired in the organisation. We didn't even have any footballs. So to take them to the grand final the following... So we made the 8 that year, if you remember. We got beaten by Parramatta in the first game. Parramatta got beaten by Newcastle in the final. And the second year, we get to the grand final, and we should have won it. You know what I mean? The following year, we get beaten by Penrith, and that I thought was a great major semi, you know. So we sort of had that period there with those players that just built that belief and coached them to believe that they could play football. And I just think if they could have kept that team together in 2004, you know, Ando made a decision to go big. We shouldn't have gone. You know, I fought, you know, and people don't know this story either. You know, I fought with a scientist to say, you know, you need to go to Ando and tell him, mate, we're big enough. Kiwis are big enough. We need to be fit. But there were rule changes and teams that were coming up bigger and getting bigger. And, you know, the head coach strategy was let's get bigger, but what happened was they didn't train, so they got big and they got slobby and they weren't fit, and we got caught out in 2004. So, in saying that, the years that we had together, mate, was some of the best years of my football career.
I'm pleased to hear that story about you and Daniel Anderson catching up, because knowing you were coming in, I've got Stacey Jones' book on my shelf, and this came out in 2004, 2005. And I thought, I wonder if Kempy gets a mention in here. And there's a whole chapter called Kempy, and there's a part in there where he talks about when Daniel Anderson was coaching and you were assistant coach, and apparently you guys weren't even talking for a time there.
Yeah, look, like there's...
How did things get so bad?
Oh, look, there's... Yeah, it's a tough one, you know, like me and him, so we're basically the same age, except I came from a professional football career and Daniel came from coaching through the ranks to get to where he was, and he's a fantastic coach. You know, some of the strategies and conversations around coaching are great, but, you know, like I said, you know, I'm not one to not say things as they are, you know, like, and I think there was a time where he had put all his eggs in the one basket, and we were on our journey in 2003. But my sister-in-law died, and I really loved her. You know, like she was she's a beautiful person. She got stomach cancer. She went through a bad journey, and when they beat Canterbury, Francis scored those 5 tries that night. It was the week she died, and I went home and I said, well, I'm not coming back, mate, until I deal with this. And I couldn't believe it, but things changed. You know, Rowan Smith, who was Brian Smith, Daniel's mentor's son, came into and he was a bit of a dickhead, you know, to be honest, the way that he was carrying on. And I came back, and the players could see that there had been a shift in the dynamic between me and Ando. And it sort of didn't repair itself from that moment on. And unfortunately, you know, that's why I went to the scientists in the off-season to say, you know, don't go big. You know, like, you've got to push really hard here to keep the boys fit, because I couldn't talk to Endo. You know, that sort of that conversation had broken down. And the other thing with that too is that me and him had a really good. It didn't really affect the way that we spoke to players, because we had a good cop, bad cop relationship with the players as well. You know, like Ando was really aggressive in the way that he spoke to players. You know, and he I've never said this, but I've stopped 2 players from hitting him. You know, come into the change room and say, you can't do that, man. I'm going to have to pick a side here. I'm going to have to protect Ando, you know, like, because I'm from the old playing group. But he would get them that wound up that they would want to, you know, start throwing punches. And but that good cop, bad cop scenario, there's so many times where he'd try to motivate them through verbal attacks that I would have to go and build them back up with a shoulder that they could lean on, and don't forget about how good you are and so forth. So, and it worked really well. It did work really well. And I just think at the end of the day, the coupled with us being big and unfit was that the players had had enough. Like, they had been enough talked to like kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's just again, that's a tenure thing, in it, when you're with the coaches. I'd been through that with coaches too. Is, you know, sometimes you just, you're done. Like, you know,
there's a saying, you lose the dressing room.
That's when they say you lose the dressing room. Well,
yeah,
mate, coaches do lose a dressing room. You know, and I've been in international teams where the coach has lost the dressing room, and I've been at club teams as a player and a coach where, and that's what was starting to happen. So I've never read the chapter in Stacey's book.
It's called Come In Kempy.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of other bits about that to bring up.
Yeah, everyone's got their, you know, everyone's got their say, but it's, you know, again...
He speaks very highly of you, by the way.
Well, Stacey, I'm Stacey Jones's biggest advocate. You know, Ando... I think, like, I asked Stacey to come back when I coached the Warriors as a head coach. He was one guy I chased, you know, and told him, come home, you need to go out on your terms. I think he's iconically the biggest player to ever play for the Warriors, and if not New Zealand. And I pushed really hard for him to get that Kiwi coach's job, you know what I mean? So it's an interesting one when you hear stories from players in and around their story of what happened. But I can take half of those stories and say, well, actually, that's not what really happened, you know, because I'm behind closed doors in a different conversation. But yeah.
Well, one thing Stacey does say, just before you lost your job at the Warriors, which you talked about before, he said there's an end of year review, and when he had his interview, he noticed there were lots of questions like based around you, and he just had was sort of whirring over in his mind, like, is this a stitch up? Like, you know, are they trying to stitch the coach up? Yeah.
And look, again, like, Tony now knows that, you know, like, there's the way that you know, CEOs work at clubs is they're going to throw the coach under the bus before the CEO gets looked at. You know, I always knew that was going to be an issue for me. You know, like Mick, when he was there, and I had to try and hold my spot, and it wasn't. I got to say, 2004, 2005 wasn't a very good working environment. You know, when all I wanted to do was win NRL games, you sort of didn't have that backup. You know, which you're probably seeing at the moment. They got really well off the field now, and now the team's starting to perform. You know, there's so many different pieces to the puzzle that have to come together, and it was tough. But again, I'm never ever going to regret it. You know, I gave my best crack. You know, there's, like I said about Hardy's, there's parts of it that I thought could have been handled better. But you know, tell me how many other blokes in New Zealand have had a chance to coach Warriors.
Yeah, the most pleasing part for me is the bit about you and Daniel Anderson still being in contact. Like when a surfing accident like that happens and someone's confined to a chair, suddenly it gives you a bit of perspective, eh? It's just fucking sport.
It is. Well, and that's the other thing, like the water off a duck's back type scenario. Ando came over. So funny story. Ando came over in October. So him and our manager Paul came over, who was a manager of Daniel's best mate. Was the manager.
Is he still in the chair?
He's still in the needs.
Right, but he's got some movement.
Assistant. Yes. But they came over, so he was fine. And we sort of started building the bridge, and I took him out at Ponsonby up here to Hoppers and had a few beers and a laugh and crack up, and he'd been invited back, and he was saying, "Oh, mate, I've been invited back, but no one's contacted me," and I was like, "Well, stay with me, man, let's have a few beers and have a catch up." And then I get a phone call a couple of months later from Paul and said, "Oh man, some bad news." I was in shock. I was like, "Yeah, they'd brought Daniel back, he died on the beach," and I was like, "Sure, I've got to get over there and see him." Whatever's happened between me and him, I'm just going to get over there and say, "Hey, man, fuck, it's only footy.
Bygones. Yeah.
You're decent guy." So, it's funny, Dom. I think there's a lot of that stuff happening as I get older. Like people that if I get a chance to say thank you to them for what they did for me, I'll do that. Especially people that have had a significant part to play in my journey. Because even at 58, there's still a lot for me to learn. And I'm always looking for the next thing to do. I think that's just I'm a, what do they call it, like a active relaxer. So I've got to be doing something.
Yeah.
And if it's to do with sport, and I said this to my mate the other day, I've got so much that I still think I can offer sport. Just got turned down this morning for the St Helens CEO role, so I was shortlisted for that, and I'm still looking at the next thing that I can do in sport. So, I'm just going to roll over and get out of the game that's given me so much. I still think I've got some more to give to it.
Yeah, 100% you do. Just a couple more on that Warriors thing. So, yeah, in your last year there, Ivan Clary was your assistant coach. He's gone on to be like one of the great coaches.
Yeah.
How was he at the time? Could you
good.
see in him that he was going to go on to do great things?
I didn't really, to be brutally honest, at the time I didn't really give it a hell of a lot of thought, because I was battling just my own position at the time, But I had Campo and Ivan, we'd spoke about getting some good coaches back to sort of help me out, and then we talked about what sort of players that we wanted when Ruben and Pricey came into the side, and we're sort of rebuilding at the time. And Ivan's very, very methodical, you know what I mean? Like he's thoughtful and not very reactive, whereas I'm a little bit, I'm going to go straight away and wear my heart on the sleeve type thing. So to see what Ivan's done through his career, he's done fantastic, fucking fantastic, man. But you look at the sides and you go, a lot of that that style was actually through his time with the Warriors. Right from the beginning. Like when you look at Kikau on the left edge and the centres and the big wingers, and how he's got his side playing and the percentages and bits and pieces like that. A lot of the grounding, personally, I think, has come out of his time at the Warriors. And the other big part of that too is understanding the Polynesian mix. Spending all that time here as a player, in amongst the core group of guys with the Arleys and the Clintons and the likes, and getting to know how they operate. To go back to Penrith, where it's a high Polynesian content of player, it's just been a perfect fit for him. So having the best halfback in the competition too, as a son, is always a bonus. But yeah, no, look, it's great to look and have some small part to play, like your coaching career was part of our coaching career, and you've gone on to win so many finals. So that's coaching dreams.
A lot of people listening to this or watching this podcast will have a situation in their life where they get fired from a job. But very few will have it done so publicly and so brutally. What's that like? It's an experience that none of us will ever go through. That must be...
it's tough. It is tough. Like it's... You know, I think from there's tears and there's, you know, the checking in with yourself. Are you good enough? You know, it's a little bit of imposter syndrome that is on the back of it.
It must shake your confidence, eh?
Yeah, it's time to reflect, you know, especially when you got, you know, again, when that happened to me, I was 35, you know, so when you come to this stage, it's not so difficult, you know, because you've got a bit more of a mature head on your shoulders and you can reason with right and wrong quite easily. But when you're taken apart like that in front of a camera and people are being baying for your blood all season anyway, it's a bit of sweet end to, you know, shit, thank God I'm out of it, and then, but I didn't want to get out of it like that type thing, you know. So, but they'll be lying to you if they said it wasn't tough, you know, to deal with it. And the more you deal with it, and the more times it happens, is why those coaches that keep going on the merry-go-round, and they've got quite good at, you know, picking up checks and going and pick up another job. But you know, for me, I guess that once that door closes, there's always another one that opens. And I went from coaching the Warriors in a professional environment. I got a phone call from Walter Little, who said, "Why don't you come and help me coach at Glenfield?" And we took Glenfield to the final of the North Shore the following year. Awesome. First training session, I showed up with my gumboots and a rain jacket. You know, I had no clipboard. I didn't have to worry about the players. I ended up getting home at like 2 o'clock in the morning because we went to the pub up the road and got tanked up. And it was, you know, I've never said this to Walter, but it was just what I needed. Was a real dose of reality. But you know, here's a guy that could see it and said, "Bro, just come and hang out with me. We'll just hang around for the season. You've got stuff to give." So, you know, I just got his boys fit. That's all I did. And let's have some fun for the year. And it's a bit easier when you've got no cameras. I remember the psychologist going on TV1 or something like this saying, "I've got an eye condition. I often got to have shades on. I can't see properly in the glare." In Newcastle, they try to get me to wear purple contacts. So I've always had shades on, no matter what. I've always got shades on, you know. And I remember the psychologist coming on just before I got sacked and goes, "He's hiding something." I was like, "No fucking shit. Yeah, you've been through what I've been through. I'm fucking hiding plenty. Don't worry about that." You know what I mean? But I'm just sitting there going, "Oh my God, they've got this lady talking about I'm hiding something when I'm fucking it's my job I'm trying to fucking keep." You know. But yeah, it's when you've got that glaring light on you. You know, it's really people are bullshitting to you and they say it doesn't affect me. It does, but it's not the effect; it's the response. You know. So if it takes you a week, if it takes you a month, if it takes you a year, how do you respond to that? And I've always been the one where I've gone, what's next? You know, what is it? So, you know, at the moment I'm between roles. I was looking at buying a business, it didn't work out, so now I'm looking at what's next. You know, it could be driving a truck, it could be helping another business out, it could be working with, you know, people that are in a little bit of trouble or whatever. But I'm sort of sitting over here going, I'm not worried about that now. I'm worried about what's coming next.
Yeah. You find out who your friends are when you go through...
Well, I don't have many friends.
Yeah.
You know, like I'll tell this to a lot of people, you count your friends on both hands. If you're lucky, you can count them on both. And you know, friends are... I've got a lot of acquaintances, you know, but friends, like a friend... Define friend for me. You know, a friend is someone who's going to cry with you, who's going to love with you, who's going to, you know, work through things with you, who's going to be there from day one.
Yeah, lean in when everyone else leans out.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, my circle is so tight, eh?
Yeah.
Super, super small.
Yeah.
But I can count on every one of them.
That's exactly right. And, you know, again, I heard another saying, you know, like a silent man is a man who's happy with himself. You know what I mean? So you don't have to have a circle of friends around you patting you on the back all the time. I don't want that. I don't want pats on the back. You know, I want a mate that phones me up and says, "How's things?" Well, me and my mate will phone each other up at least once a fortnight and like just talk about how are you. Not like, you're driving a flash car or you got a big house or how many friends have you got type thing. It's like, this is what you talk about. So, acquaintances, thousands. But friends are friends and family. You count on both hands.
You've been super open today, and there's been some real moments of vulnerability. Have you always been good at communicating like this, or were you quite staunch as a young fella?
Well, I got no people tell you got to tell him to shut up because he's got no problem talking. Yeah. So I did a thing with Staffy the other night, and he said yes. He goes, yes, Uncle. Okay, you got to. I know, mate. We're not. I got to turn your mic off because you talk too much. You got to remember where I come from. Like I wasn't allowed to talk. I wasn't allowed opinion. I remember in Newcastle when I first went there, and Mike, the chairman, and I stayed with him and his wife and his 4 sons, and they were mad cricketers, and they're watching the Aussie cricket team play. And if you know Aussies and Aussie cricket, it's like All Blacks, Yeah. And they're arguing. Boys are arguing with their father about who's the better batsman and who's the better bowler and all this sort of shit. And I'm getting worked up on the couch because I'm saying, you don't fucking talk to your father like that. You know what I mean? And I'm thinking, he's talking to them, and I got up and went to bed. So I'd had enough of this discussion, and I didn't know it was a discussion, did I? I thought these boys should never talk to their father like that, out of respect. I'll get up for breakfast the next morning, and Mike comes and sits down, and he goes, can I just have a chat? And I said, yeah. And I said, what? He goes, what was that last night? I said, what do you mean? He goes, why'd you go to bed early? I said, in my household, mate, we're not allowed to talk like that to our father. He said, I wanted to get up and start swinging at the boys, And he said, that's called discussion, mate. He said, I encourage that. And again, there's another picture, So my kids, my daughter came to me. My daughter was a great sports person. I thought she was going to play netball for New Zealand. And she comes back, and my partner said, your daughter wants to chat with you. And I'm like, okay. And she comes in, and she goes, right, and gives me this essay of why she's not playing netball anymore, and all she wants to do is concentrate on education. She was head girl at Rangitoto College, biggest school in New Zealand. And I went, mate, I had no comeback to say, shut up, you fucking play netball. And walked out of the house giggling to myself going, oh my God. And then she comes out and she says, have you got anything else to say, Dad? Because I've got more to finish. So when you're talking about have you been able to, I'm a hell of a lot better, Dom, at expression. I think it's time. You get old. When you get older, you just you learn what's important and what matters and what doesn't. Yeah, and to be honest, I don't give a fuck, mate. Like to be honest, like I don't care what people fucking think. I know how I've lived. I know there's things that I've done wrong, and there's some fucking things that I've done right. And to be honest, I don't give 2 hoots about what you fucking think about me, But there's 2 traits, and people always tell who know me is he will do what he says he'll do. So what he says he'll do, and you can fucking trust him. And that's one of my biggest can be one of my biggest faults as well, because I trust people too much. I've been burnt that many times by people like the John Harts, those type of situations where I trust you, and as I've got older, I've just decided myself, well, mate, maybe just relax a little bit on that side of things, because I can name half a dozen blokes. I'm going, fuck, I had your back. If I would be the bloke you take me to war with you. But then when you're in hindsight now and going, fuck, thank God I didn't go to war with you, mate. You would have shot me in the back.
I can't remember what your statement was when you left the Warriors, but in Stacey's book, he applauds you for leaving with like dignity and grace and mana. Yeah, it's so great to hear. Like, you made my day, mate. Like, I haven't read that. I'm fucking going to go and find it now and have a read of it. But it wasn't. I couldn't say anything about anybody, or I couldn't throw rocks at this
job that I had, you know, all these people, because I loved them all. I loved what I do, and I'd loved it for so many years. And that's what when I left and made my closing statement, it was to say I basically wanted to thank rugby league. And I wasn't thanking the Warriors. I was thanking my parents for driving me to the football games, for all of my mates that helped me make those teams, you know, that played and took shit from me all those years. Right through to my family having to put up with a professional sportsman. It ain't fucking easy, you know what I mean? To all of my teammates encouraging me to, at the end, this is where I am with you guys, and thanks a lot for giving me these wonderful 5 years coaching the Warriors as a club. You know, people say to me, like, why are you fucking bagging the Warriors? I'm not bagging them, you idiot. I'm giving my opinion of things that I think could be done better, or how I see things. They're actually my club. And what do you know? Well, I fucking coached them for 5 years. You know what I mean? Some people are so, let's just go, that's keyboard shit, you know what I mean? It's like, rugby league, if you know the people, they are the, rugby league people are the best people in the sports domain. Because they get nothing, they get shit done, and they make sure that you have a shitload of fun doing it. And now they're reaping the rewards since 2023 when the WAS thing kicked off. You know, and when you look at the demographic now that the Warriors got, it's totally changed. You know, that crossover crowd that's come from rugby union now because the Warriors have got it right. Rugby union handed it to the Warriors on a, you know, on a fucking. On a rule change. What we got to be careful here is that the NRL don't hand it back to rugby. You know, I text Joey on Sunday and I said, it's a game of fucking touch. These referees are killing the game. Because you see as an ex-coach and ex-player, you see it differently. And for us at home, it's definitely home ground advantage because of the six again, you know. So make hay while the sun shines, boys. Because they're going to come and change that rule again, and all of a sudden she's an even playing field again.
Yeah. Shit, you love that club, eh? And the sport.
I absolutely love the club, and I absolutely love the sport, and I've got two clubs in the Newcastle and the Warriors. You know, I love this.
If they were in a grand final together,
fuck, mate. Well, I'd be in both changing rooms. You know.
Yeah.
So when I was at Newcastle, there's systemic racism at the time. There, I got in a bit of trouble for that as well. You know, like I stood my ground. One of the players called. A mate of mine, Andrew Tangata, a black so-and-so, I ended up having a fucking fist fight with him in a pub about it. I was sort of known for that back there in Newcastle. But Newcastle was where my dreams came true, you know what I mean? It was right on the coast. I love surfing from Taranaki. It had everything, you know. And then coming back to coach the Warriors and just seeing it build over the last 25 years. You've got to remember that. Like, since 2000, it's been here since 95. And I didn't get to see those first 5 years because I was overseas, but since 2000 I've seen it go up and down like this. Sorry about the mic. It's on an absolute crest of a wave at the moment. Yeah. And the only thing that is going to fuck it up are these rule changes. You know what I mean? They're gonna somehow turn it into something that it's not. And for the purists at the moment, such as myself and guys that are watching it going, leave the rules alone and let it be a contest. People aren't going to want to watch 60-point games, 60 to 20, 40 to 10, you know what I mean? They want to see a contest for 80 minutes. And that's my fear at the moment. But yeah, as you can tell, I'm passionate. Love it.
Are the Warriors ever going to win?
100%. Yeah, I think they will. I think, you know, again, they're sort of similar to the Kiwis. Is like once they get there, it's going to be hard to knock them off. But they've got so many things against them. They've got travel. They've got weather issues. You know, it's cold, wet. You know, you've got Australians that want to come over here for a lot more than what they would get paid in Australia. So you've got so much not going for you. But I think they're operating really well at the moment. They're doing a great job off the football field. Like you see the different demographic and the crowds and the socials, and I think this stuff here, like media-wise, is really important. You know, like they're pulling in so many different people across the world now, supporting this club here. That once they do get it right on the football field, they're going to find it really hard to get it wrong again because people go, shit, I want to be involved in that club. So I think they've been there twice or three times now to a final. 2011, 2002, one other, I could be wrong. But I think once they get there, Dom, it'll be a hell of a party.
It's goosebump stuff when you see the packed stands at Go Media Stadiums chanting the Warriors' winning song, which was originally like just a dressing room sort of chant that they had.
So let's clear this one up. So I got asked if I knew anyone that could write a song. Yep. So Mick asked me, so I went to Peter Ehrlich and asked him to write us a team song. So that song that everyone sings is written by Peter Ehrlich. It's been changed because it's taken the swear words out of it, but it actually was written in 2001 by Pete.
Actually?
By Pete Ehrlich.
Do you know the words? We are the Warriors.
We are the team, we are the Warriors. That's all you fucking need. So stand up and shout it to the end. We are the Warriors 100%. So he wrote that. So, man, I don't sing it, but we sung it plenty back in those days. But he wrote that song. Ando was like, let's put a few fucking swear words in there, get it pumped up. And now when they sing it at the game, so when I'd commentated there for 5 or 6 years at the Warriors for the radio stations on the Sport, and with Alan Mack and of course Sammy Hewitt, and when the last few years was they stand up in the crowd and put it up on the screen and they start singing it, it's like, oh man, that's a team song, So the support's fantastic. You know what the Warriors support can be like, because when Origin came around and grew to what it's grown like, you see it every year since the 80s of what it's grown to. So that's where, if you want to model what support can look like if the Warriors start winning, it's going to look like Origin support. You know what I mean? So,
unreal.
They'll get there. I think they'll get there.
You mentioned just then in that answer about the commentary stuff you've done. You've done quite a bit of media stuff as well. Breakfast show on Sens with Israel Dag.
Israel?
Actually, I found your exit quote online after you were dumped or made redundant, whatever. Yep. And it's wonderful. It's really graceful. I am thankful for having such a big opportunity to be a breakfast host. Hell, who would have thought that? Business is business. There are success and failure stories all the time. I would like to think that Izzy and Kempy were a success.
Yeah. And it's not my style. It's not my style to, and of course, Sens was going through the sale to Entain, and Entain went with Scotty Stevenson with Izzy for breakfast, and mate, it's like you lose your position in a team, you go and join another club, you know what I mean? So I'd set a goal. So Marty Devlin, good mate of mine, I started doing some, when he was 1ZB, I'd go and do the odd Saturday with him and Tony Veach and all them guys and talk rugby league, and I thought all right with it, and they were like, come on in, man, do it. And Marty gave me a shot at a night spot on a Sunday night. So I would actually go in and I'd do the Sunday show just before they closed down Radio Sport. So I did maybe a month of that, and I got to like it. So I set a goal. So I wrote a little goal on my vision board and had my own breakfast show. Well, I didn't know that, I went and filled in Sport Nation over a Christmas period for Izzy, because Izzy went on his Christmas break, that Baz McCullum was going to get the English job, and then they came to me and said, do you want the breakfast job? And I'd gone, well, yeah, it's my goal. I'm going to do that, and that's, those opportunities that you get, you just grab them with both hands. And I did that job for 2 years. I've loved media. I remember Bailey Mackey. Bailey used to come in. He was a young TV3 reporter for the news, and no, Ando wouldn't give him any time, but he was a young Māori reporter, so I'd say, who do you want? And he'd go, can I get this guy? And I'd go and get him. And then when I lost my job and went out the way that I did, one of the first guys to give me a call was Bailey Mackey, and he was a sport producer for Māori television. And he said, what are you doing? I said, not much, man. Just lost my job. And he goes, yeah, I know that. He says, have you thought about commentating? And I went, yeah, I'll give it a crack. He says, well, come in. I'll give you a job working on Māori television as a commentator. You know what I mean? So that's basically how I got my start through Marty and Bailey, and then the rest was, I've had a breakfast show, and like I said to you now, I'm looking at starting up my own podcast, because you talk with underwater with a mouthful of marbles, as you might say.
So there's so much you've done: rugby league, player, coach, admin, commentator. I've heard you say that your most important contribution might still lie ahead. I read that somewhere. What did you mean? What do you think it is? Or
well, I've got this thing about community and giving back, and my son's doing he's a lawyer, but he's working for Auckland University with first year law students and doing a project at the moment, and he's looking at disoranga tamariki stuff, and that sort of community stuff and helping people understand, like it's easy to tell your story, but it's actually hard to understand it because you don't live it, and there's so many like instances which you recognise and go, man, if only someone could really understand what's going on there. You're talking about the problem, you're not dealing with the problem, and you're maybe dealing with the wrong part of the problem. So personally, I think that there's a little bit more for me still to do with the community. I love giving back to the community. It's something I've done down in my home. I used to go back to my high school every year and talk. I met, just recently I was out with my wife up in Ponsonby, and a young guy walked up to me and he said, and this has happened to me quite often, and he said, I remember you coming down and giving a talk at our school, and it changed my life. I've now gone on and done this. You know what I mean? So a lot of those storytelling situations that I'd put myself in was basically telling the story that I've basically told you today in a more confined environment, to break what I call down that korowai and take it off so that you can open up and listen to what that change can look like. And if I was to give any advice to someone, is like one of the strongest attributes that you could help yourself with is creating a vision board, because when I go back through my life and look at the pictures in my life that were in my head that I converted into a goal that I now have on a vision board, it's amazing how often those pictures change because you believe in them. And I've got a young painter working at my place at the moment, painting the house, and he's 15. He's left school, doesn't know what he's going to do, and I'm working on a vision board with him at the moment. Because it's not what I'm saying is you don't know what environment he's coming from. He just needs a different picture, and I think there's so much in just that saying. Why you think about it now, all of our young people got different pictures in their hands called on Apple iPhone, it's changing all the time, but why couldn't you create your own picture? So I think we're getting stuck in that part at the moment, listening to rhetoric, listening to bullshit politicians talking about, the state of play and stuff like that. Actually, what's the core issue? How can we change it? What are we going to do to change it? And that's the other thing with, like how many of us as professional people are actually thinking about doing stuff like that? Because I think every professional athlete, most of them have come from the type of environment that I've been in. It's okay to give back. It's okay to go and talk to schools and, say this is how I done it, because someone's always, looking for that, like I was as a young fella, looking for that that picture that this picture doesn't quite look right for me.
The vision board thing is probably one of the big takeaways I've got from this chat. The fact that you were doing it when no one else was, like when you're a teenage boy in Wairau, and the fact you're still doing it now as a man in your late 50s, I find that super inspiring.
Yeah, and I'd put something on it last night. Like we pulled a card together, me and my partner, and just we actually pulled the same card out of the same deck, and I read it and I was like, shit, that's so true right now, and that's on the vision board, So, it's empowering, Dom, for someone like me, even though I left school when I was 15, I've got diplomas in language and licenses in health and all that sort of stuff. So I had probably more of an educational experience post school than I did while I was there. Yeah. But like I say to most people when they're looking, when I am looking at roles, is I've also got 30 years of life experience. And I don't, if I'm hiring people, I like the piece of paper that they bring with them, but I like the experience more, you know, because the experience is real and people have lived that. So their vision board for me is it's actually alive. And I've got to change a few of the pictures on it, you know what I mean? Like I had a picture of one asset up on it, and it's actually sitting in the garage, so I've got to take that down and change it, type thing.
Oh, because you got it.
Because I got it.
Jet ski, boat?
I got it. No, it's a car, but it's a piece of art. You know what I mean? So, it's really funny. I'll talk this to kids when their parents will phone me and say, "Oh, I'll talk to Ricky Herbert last week. You know, at this great man, Ricky." And this function, and he's running his academy, and him and his wife are looking after some young footballers down in Cambridge. And I said, "Oh, you wouldn't believe it, Ricky, I was the first guy in Newcastle to be put in a family house when I went over there, because I was only 19, so they've got a house mum, and I was one of the very first times those houses started. So, mate, I've got some experience in those. I'll come down and have a chat to your kids." And next day on the phone, Ricky's, "Mate, get down here," you know. So I'll be taking that down there. You know, I think one of the biggest assets I can leave with people is how to actually understand what that looks like, and the if anything, the power that it can hold with you if you've got that belief.
Yeah, I've had David Neathie on the podcast a couple of times. He was the mental skills coach of Lydia Ko and Israel Adesanya. They both had the same thing. Like, as he superimposed the belt on himself, Lydia got a copy of Golf Digest magazine and put her face on the cover.
Yeah. Geez, I wish I was a golfer earning 30 million, or a UFC fighter like Izzy earning 30 million. Jeez, I'm trying to get me first 30 million.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, look, it's really powerful, and it's, you know, if you reinforce that, because it helps you. You know what I mean? Like. Just say, for instance, you go through a bit of trouble and you're feeling a little bit negative and down on yourself, and you go and lie. So my vision board is at the foot of my bed. So I look at it every single day.
Wow.
You know, so I wake up in the morning and I'll look at it and go, yeah, okay, this is where I'm headed, type thing. What it does for you is it puts you back in the right mindset, you know, and my mindset, I said to my partner only a couple of weeks ago, I said, "I'm really grateful." You know, I said, "Have a look at me. You know, have a look where we've come from." And I'm just really grateful that she's really empathic, a beautiful woman, and she's really encouraging. And I just say, you know, I just wanted to say to you, I'm so grateful for the tools that you allow me to use, so that I can understand why I'm feeling grateful, and I'm just really grateful for how you've been around me. And of course I needed that, because, you know, I'm in between roles at the moment, I'm looking for something new and all that sort of stuff, and instead of getting down on it, I'm going, man, well, have a look. You know, people where you come from would be happy to be sitting in where you're sitting. Don't get shitty about it. But, you know, first time I've ever talked about it. Because the other thing too is, I'm generally, you see me in a shirt today, I'm generally walking around in shorts and a singlet. She calls me Fred Dag. Get some clothes on.
We live in the same sort of area, so I'll run past. There's a very popular bar called Jacuzzi, and I'll run past there. I'll see you sitting out the front. You've done pretty good for a boy from Wairau.
Yeah, look, I think, and at the end of it, when I look back on it, I've given it a crack, you know. So I've given it a crack. I think the underdog is the most lethal person you can deal with, you know. So this, you know, I've only just touched on stories, you know, like you've been in positions where you just never wanted to be in, you know, had to fight yourself out of it. I say to people, I said this last week at a function, you know, like people say what it was like growing up in Wairau. Well, yeah, it was competitive, but we didn't just fight for a win, we fought for oxygen. You know, we fought to breathe, man. It was, you know, the calibre of person that came out of there. Was, you know, Charlie McAllister was an All Black, Māori All Black with Colin Cooper, you know, their kids, and Luke and Kayla. Jason Matthews was a surfing champion. Karen Topless was a netball silver fern. Myself and Davey Watson and Howie Tamari all come out of the same rugby league club the Montgomerys and the Lawrence rode in the Olympics. You know, and I'm just touching on the sporting side. You know, my wife's from Waitara, she's a doctor. You know, Bruce Sherrick ran the thoroughbred. He's from Waitara. He ran the thoroughbred New Zealand. This is all from a town that's no bigger than 5,000 people. So, I guess the wanting, the will to fight and the will to get ahead. You know, you weren't alone. You know, especially in our upbringing down there in that small town. So when I look back on it, I see the guy said to me, "What's one thing you leave?" I said, "Well, just don't forget where you come from." And I'll tell you this story. I hopped in a van when I was 21 down in Uranui. We actually got kicked out of the pub because Alan Sherrick, who you know is a horse trainer, is one of my best mates, and there's 15 of us who are really good mates. We all travel around. Used to be around the mountain pub crawl, but we were at this pub, and he said, "Oh, we go and jump in the van. You're in the front seat. You don't ever want to get in the front seat because you get told to get in the front seat, you've done something wrong." And he put me in the front seat, and I'm thinking, well, what the fuck have I done wrong? And I said I couldn't see it, so I'd been acting like a pork chop, you know, football star, blah blah blah. Jumped in the van, cruising back from Uranui to Waitara, and he just gave me, "Who the fuck do you think you are? Don't forget where you come from." All right. And I cuddled up because I thought he was going to hit me next, because that's what they give you a bout in the gut. So I've seen that happen in the van a few times. And from that moment on, it straightened and levelled me out. You know, it basically taught me what ego was. So it taught me a hell of a lot, you know, Eckhart Tolle and his books and how that ego thing works. I see a lot of that. I see a lot of that, and it lets a lot of people down. But when you remember where you come from and thinking about, you know, growing up in that caravan, you know, 6 of us in a 15-foot caravan, to state homes, to going to Newcastle because I had put liniment and a headband on, played like a pork chop, and to end up where I am now, I will never forget where I come from.
When you stand in front of the mirror having a shave, do you like the man looking back at you?
Sometimes, yeah. There's a lots of parts of my life that I don't like, you know. But it's all growth, Dom. You know, there's times, you know, some of the hardest stuff is I was a hard taskmaster with my kids around sport. You know, my son told me when he was 14 they didn't want to play rugby anymore because every time he played rugby, people were saying, "Are you going to be as good as your dad?"
Yeah, a lot of pressure.
Yeah, you know, it just broke my heart. Broke my heart. But yeah, there's things that, geez, if I wouldn't do that now, but I can't take it back.
You just got to learn from them, eh?
Well, it doesn't define you. That's hopefully, you know, what I keep telling myself. It doesn't define you at that moment. Yeah, you know, but you're not that person anymore. So there's so much more to learn and to grow and to be better at. And I'm the first to admit that. You know, I'm not by nowhere near perfect. But I've got a loving partner. I've got kids that love me. I've got some good friends. Yeah, and I've got a great sport that I love. Yeah. And you know, what else do you want?
It's so cool, eh? Like when I was in my 20s, I would have thought, you know, by the time I get to my 50s, life's pretty much done. Yeah. Well, you know everything you're going to know. Like, and then you get there and you realise, oh shit, oh no, there's different levels. Yeah, there's always another mountain to climb, and I think that's an exciting thing about ageing.
Yeah, well, you know, if you're listening to all the podcasts here at the moment, they're talking about reversing ageing now in our lifetime. It's going to be scary. I'm just waiting for robotics to come out so give me a couple of new legs and a couple of new arms, you know. But yeah, I think, you know, I think retirement, it's, what is it, a word? You know, like I'd much rather be doing something. Yeah, you know,
need a purpose.
Yeah, and purpose is important. You know, probably the most important thing. If you don't have any purpose, then shit, it's a battle. You know, you're stuck. You stay inside. You close your curtains. You won't do anything. So, it's like, what is that purpose? Because for me, it's a revolving door. You know, one role comes in and the other one goes out, and then the next minute you're doing something different that you never ever thought you were going to do. I always just think, you know, like, give it your best. You know, and if your best is good enough, you generally people love you for doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then change is constant. So change for me in my whole career, my whole life has been constant. From when I was a kid to even today, sitting here with you and thinking for the last 2 weeks, am I really going to go on that show and talk to Dom about my life? It's the first time you ever do that, So on our walk this morning, my partner said to me, "Are you ready for it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I am." And that's, at my age, obviously I don't think of age. I think one of the things that makes people old is talking about your age and thinking that you're that age. And I've never ever seen that part of myself, like when I was wringing wet, getting tossed around the lounge room, I would have been 30 kilos. I actually thought I was like a man in my head, People say, "Geez, you're a big man." I'm like, no, I'm a tiny man. Because it's in my head, And in my football career, they say, "Oh, how old are you?" And I always say I was 27, and I was 31. I had the, "Oh no, I'm 27, man." And no, I'm going to go and check your passport and sign your contracts and then put my date on it. What's your date? So I don't know birthdays. I always get my mum's birthday wrong. I don't follow birthdays or dates like Christmases and Anzacs and stuff. I don't know when they fall. And I just think it's while you're breathing, might as well give it a decent crack.
100%. How's this been for you today?
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
Dom, it's been good. Do
you feel quite vulnerable now, or
I do.
Exposed?
I do. I think vulnerability is a good thing.
Yeah.
But I do. I've done this just as much for me. As it is. Again, I had that. Oh, why do people want to listen to me talking? You know what I mean? Like, I had that negativity come into my head, and there's times when people say, well, you're a decent footballer and you're coached, and you forget about that, and you're just like, well, yeah, maybe there is something in there. If there's, I always used to say this when I talk at school, if there's one thing that someone can take away from this and changes your life, then I've succeeded.
Yeah.
Because that one thing of standing on the hill or going to stay at Frank's that night, or putting on that liniment, you know what I mean? It changed my life drastically. And it's not about changing that one life, because that there's an old adage that what does 1 + 1 equal? It's not 2, it's 11. And then that 11 + 11, it's 1,111. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The one change is actually multiplied 1,000 times, and if I can have an effect in that change, then at least you've left something.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great chat. It's been a lot of fun from my perspective, and I appreciate you being so open about the crunchy stuff early on. I mean, people that only know you for your public persona, I mean, their opinion doesn't matter anyway. But these people would have no idea like what you've been through or what your journey is.
No, I don't think so. I don't talk about it. And I just sometimes I think to myself, why don't you talk about it? Is it you that doesn't want to hear it, or are you too frightened to deal with it? But and at the end of the day, I think authenticity is really important. As I get older, to be authentic, because I run this really straight line, between black and white. So when I say I'm actually doing it for myself, I'm really am doing it for myself, because I want people to understand that, hey man, from a place of authenticity, this is what I actually went through.
Yeah.
I never had a silver spoon in my mouth, and I didn't fall on a football and it all came to me, in an easy fashion. It was a grind. It was a grind right from day dot. Even till today, it's still a grind. So yeah. I'm happy to come and talk to you.
Is breaking the cycle one of your greatest victories?
Yeah. I haven't broken it 100%. I think trauma and DNA are misunderstood. And DNA isn't just physical. DNA is mental as well. It's seeing DNA travels through you from the outside. And one of the biggest things that I've made a purpose is not to try and pass as much trauma onto my kids as I can. It's harder to do and to say, but when I was speaking to my son about this yesterday, so I'm having a bit of practice with my son, talking about what he's doing and stuff like that. When he listens to me, he breaks down and cries. He can't believe it.
It's bloody sad, mate.
And
sad, and none of it was your fault.
Yeah, and and I get that with him, but I also say to him, look, I don't want to pass this on to you. I just want you to understand, this is what's going on. We don't have to be like this, and it's for me, it is a little bit of healing. It's frightening to be putting it out there, but again, a lot of people they misunderstand me. You know what I mean? I think it's about time people sort of understood the true story as well as the real story of there's some stuff here that maybe think twice about. When you're putting your picture up next to me in the dartboard and you're throwing those darts at me, that maybe don't aim between my eyes.
Don't be so quick to judge.
Hit me on the shoulder. Hit me on the shoulder every now and then.
I'm proud of you, mate. Are you proud of yourself?
Look, I am. I think success is one of the things that we don't do well enough in our culture. I think you have to celebrate success, and I just don't think you have to vocalise it and show it off. I think success is I'm happy sharing my success with my immediate friends and family, and I don't need a wider circle to pat me on the back.
Yeah,
I know, and the biggest person I have to convince that that I am celebrating success is myself. And if I can do that, then I'm happy.
Tony Kemp, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, mate.
Cheers, Don.
It's been awesome.
Been a while.
It's been longer than a game of footy.
It is. Cheers, mate.